Chapter 464. Knowing that Luo Feiheng was no longer in danger, Xiao Baiyu breathed a sigh of relief and said, "Maybe this is also a good home for Feiheng. The Luo family has restrained him too much. At this time, Feiheng is the real Feiheng." After that, Xiao Baiyu also returned to the imperial court. After all, he also came on behalf of the imperial court this time. It was not good to stay with Chu Xiu for too long. Fang Qi Xiao came up and said, "Are you familiar with Xiao Baiyu of Jixia Learning Palace? This person is really a character." The Lord of Sword King City said that Xiao Baiyu alone is equivalent to a sect. Chu Xiu nodded. He knew what the Lord of Sword King City meant. Some people could practice but not teach. Teaching disciples also required skills. Obviously, Xiao Baiyu's skills in teaching disciples were very strong. However, after Fang Qi Xiao finished speaking, he raised his head proudly and said, "But teaching disciples also depends on the person. Real geniuses don't need to be taught, just like me. If hard work is useful, what's the use of geniuses?" Chu Xiu glanced at Fang Qi Xiao. This guy's swordsmanship was so good that even the 4 major sword halls in Sword King City could not teach him. He was indeed a genius. Of course, with his mouth, if he was not a genius, Sword King City would have expelled him from the sect immediately. At this moment, Fang Qi Xiao's expression suddenly became a little serious. He poked Chu Xiu and said, "Brother Chu, there's a guy who is not easy to deal with. I guess you'll be in trouble again. I used to have a good impression of monks, but since I met this guy, I hate baldies very much." Chu Xiu followed Fang Qi Xiao's gaze and saw another group of people in the distance. Although there were only a dozen people, Buddhist monks bowed their heads to them wherever they passed. In fact, there should have been 2 groups of people. Among the dozen or so people, only one was a young man. The others were all old monks. They were all wearing loose gray Zen robes. They didn't have kasayas, and they seemed very casual. These monks were generally older, and their strength was not weak. The weakest among them was at the unity of nature state, and the 2 leaders were actually martial Tao masters of the real pellet state. These old monks were from the South Buddhist sect Subodhi Monastery. Compared to the Great Light Temple, the Subodhi Monastery was much more low-key. The Temple of Great Light trained their physique, while the Subodhi Zen Monastery trained their dharma. Therefore, the Subodhi Zen Monastery had stricter requirements for their disciples. Only when their attainments in dharma had reached an extremely profound realm would they be considered an official disciple of the Subodhi Zen Monastery. Therefore, after all these years, the number of people in the Subodhi Monastery never exceeded 1,000, but there was not a single mediocre person. This time, Subodhi Zen Monastery sent 2 martial Tao Grand Masters to welcome Master Tan Yuan, which could be considered as giving him a lot of face. Although only one person from the Great Light Temple came, this person's weight was no less than the dozen people from the Subodhi Monastery. This was because the person who came was the most outstanding disciple of the Great Light Temple of this generation. He was known as the genius of the Great Light Temple in thousands of years, the second on the Longhu list, Wisdom King, Zongxian. This was the first time Chu Xiu had seen this famous genius of the Longhu list. Compared with Fang Qi Xiao, this Wisdom King Zongxian was more handsome than Fang Qi Xiao. This Wisdom King Zongxian, who was famous in the Jianghu, looked very young. He was not very handsome, but he was extremely masculine. His face and body, every contour seemed to be chiseled and chiseled. In particular, Zongxian's eyes contained a Buddhist light, as if he was really a Buddha from heaven. It made people unable to see any emotions hidden behind the Buddhist light, as if he was really a walking statue of Buddha. Zongxian's attire was also very strange. He only wore a pair of monk's pants, and his upper body was bare. The color of his muscles looked like they were cast from brass or gold. The strangest thing was the huge prayer beads hanging around his neck. Each prayer bead was as big as a baby's head, and all sorts of Sanskrit were written on them. It looked very mystical. Fang Qixiao's expression was serious, which was rare for him. He said, "This guy is a freak. I suspect he doesn't have any emotions at all. How did the Great Light Temple cultivate such a monster? In any case, I really don't like this guy. It seems like you've offended quite a number of monks. I have a feeling that this guy, Zongxian, will come looking for trouble with you. You'd better pray for yourself. Monsters can only be dealt with by monsters. In the Jianghu, the only person who can deal with a monster like Zongxian is that guy, Zhang Chengzhen. That guy is also a monster. Have you ever seen a normal person born with tattoos?" After saying that, Fang Qixiao even moved to the side silently. This surprised Chu Xiu. This was the first time he had seen an existence that could make someone like Fang Qixiao so fearful. Fang Qixiao was ranked 3rd on the Longhu leaderboard, while Zongxian was ranked 2nd. No one knew if the two of them had fought before. However, looking at Fang Qixiao's reaction, he should have fought with Zongxian before and even suffered some losses. Otherwise, he would not have been so fearful of Zongxian. Zongxian looked in the direction where Fang Qixiao and Chu Xiu were. Of course, he was mainly looking at Fang Qixiao. His eyes were covered by a layer of Buddhist light, and the expression on his face was like a statue. There was no change at all, so no one could read any information from his eyes, be it kindness or malice. "Fang Qixiao, you're here too," Zongxian said calmly. Zongxian said faintly. His voice was hoarse, like metal rubbing against metal. However, his tone was extremely calm and no emotions could be heard from it. Fang Qixiao snorted coldly and said, "Why? Can't I come?" Zongxian did not say anything else. He was not here to find trouble with Fang Qixiao, but to welcome Master Tam Yuan on behalf of the Great Light Temple. With his personality, he would not be able to distinguish between good and evil. It was only because Fang Qixiao had fought with him before, and Fang Qixiao's strength had gained his recognition that he took the initiative to greet Fang Qixiao. There was no special meaning to it. It was just out of etiquette, and it was etiquette that Zongxian himself thought was etiquette. At that moment, a Buddhist sect warrior suddenly pointed at Chu Xiu and said, "Masters of Sabodhi Zen Monastery and senior brother Zongxian, this Chu Xiu has insulted our Buddhist sect. He said that we only read Buddhist scriptures and do not do good deeds, and that we are hypocritical. We are not strong enough, so we dare not argue with him. Now that Masters and senior brother Zongxian are here, please seek justice for our Buddhist sect." Upon hearing this, the disciples who were not from the Buddhist sect raised their eyebrows. Another complaint? This was what the Buddhist sect was good at. Actually, compared to the Daoist sect, most of the Buddhist sects were more united, other than the Zen sect and the Tantric sect, which had some differences and conflicts between them. A small monastery would invite a monk from a big monastery to preach, while a monk from a big monastery would invite a monk from a small monastery to attend the ceremony. This was very normal. Therefore, it was widely recognized in the underworld that Buddhist sect warriors were not to be trifled with. If you offended a monk from a small monastery, who knew what kind of people would be involved in the aftermath? The reason why Chu Xiu had a grudge with the Great Light Temple was actually because of this situation. It was because he had killed Zen Master Heng Shan during his mission, which resulted in so much hatred. On the other hand, the Daoist sect was much more normal. You cultivate your Dharma, and I comprehend my Tao. The Daoist sect had 3,000 Dharma, and everyone did their own thing. Everyone did not interfere with each other, and there were not many implications. Anyway, as long as one sect was not destroyed, the orthodoxy would not be destroyed. What was the point of doing so many useless things? Therefore, in comparison, the people of the underworld were somewhat dissatisfied with the Buddhist sect's tradition. They thought that the Buddhist sect was too protective of their own. Now that the Buddhist sect disciple had come out to complain, this also made the eyes of Sabodhi Zen Monastery and Zongxian look at Chu Xiu. The few old monks from Sabodhi Zen Monastery frowned. They were all older generations of underworld warriors, so they did not pay much attention to the new generation of underworld elites like Chu Xiu. However, the high monks from Sabodhi Zen Monastery were good at maintaining their composure, so they did not need to be overly entangled with a junior warrior like Chu Xiu. Moreover, they were here to welcome Master Tam Yuan. If they were to make a move now, they would be ruining the Buddhist sect's own reputation. Therefore, these few monks from Sabodhi Zen Monastery did not question Chu Xiu or anything. Instead, they glared at the monk who had complained, signaling him not to cause trouble. However, at that moment, Zongxian suddenly said, "You're Chu Xiu?" The Chu Xiu who killed the Great Light Temple's Vajra Monastery disciple and consecutively defeated several Great Light Temple disciples on Floating Jade Mountain? Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows and said, "Why? You want to seek justice for them? The Great Light Temple sure has many talents. If one couldn't win, then a second one came." In the end, even Wisdom King Zongxian, whose name has shaken the underworld, showed up. "I'm very curious who will come next." Zongxian's tone did not contain any emotion. He only said in a narrating tone, "Justice is fought for by oneself, not by others. Even if they beg me, I won't help them. However, I'm a disciple of the Great Light Temple, so I can't just watch my fellow disciples suffer. This isn't seeking justice, it's just a formality." As soon as he said that, before anyone could react, Zongxian suddenly moved. Strong winds howled, and the ground collapsed. His entire body shone with Buddhist light, and the Wisdom King seal fell. It was as if he really had the might of a Wisdom King descending into the world, shocking the world. Zongxian's sudden attack was something that Chu Xiu did not expect, and it was something that no one present had expected as well. It was too sudden. Zongxian's way of thinking seemed to be somewhat different from normal people. Any rules or things like face were useless to him. He simply used his own way of thinking to deal with any problem without any emotion. Just like what Fang Qishao said, this person was a freak. It was clear that he did not want to seek justice for his fellow disciples of the Great Light Temple, but because he was a disciple of the Great Light Temple, he had to attack Chu Xiu as a matter of routine. It had nothing to do with his reputation, but he was unusually decisive. Chapter 465. Zongxian held the Akalanatha seal in his hand. In Chu Xiu's eyes, the power was so strong that it was infinitely close to the level of a martial Dao master. It even gave him the illusion that he was fighting Nie Renlong from the past. People like Zongxian had a strange way of thinking. If he was weak, he would be the standard lunatic, and no one would care about him. However, if he had Zongxian's strength, then it was just like what Fang Qishao said, he was a freak. There was no other way but to stay away from him. However, now that Zongxian had made his move, Chu Xiu could not hide even if he wanted to. Under the Akalanatha seal, the sun, moon, and stars will in Chu Xiu's eyes rotated. He performed the heaven sun gazing at air skill to the extreme, but it was still useless. Zongxian's power was so strong that he could seal all the space around Chu Xiu to dodge. He was like a real Akalanatha. Under the extreme power, Chu Xiu could not dodge and could only choose to take it head-on. Squinting, Chu Xiu's body emitted a terrifying demonic aura and murderous aura. He performed the Avicii Three Sabers saber intent to the extreme. When the saber slashed out, it was like the gates of hell had opened. The power was extremely terrifying. The blood-refined divine aura seemed to have condensed into a substance, turning into a sharp blade that condensed on the saber. Zongxian's Akalanatha seal was the incarnation of the Akalanatha, while Chu Xiu's demonic saber was the sacrifice to become a demon. Only when facing a martial Dao master would Chu Xiu explode with this level of power. Apart from burning his blood essence, this was the peak of Chu Xiu's power. Zongxian was not a martial Dao grandmaster, but the pressure he brought to Chu Xiu was not inferior to a martial Dao grandmaster. As the bright ruler seal clashed with Chu Xiu's demonic blade, an extremely powerful force suddenly burst forth. Chu Xiu's demonic blade, which seemed to be extremely powerful, actually shattered inch by inch under the bright ruler seal. The demonic chi was melted, and the refined blood divine shield was suppressed. The bright ruler seal, which was not considered a top-notch technique in the Great Radiance Temple, was used by Zhongxian to the acme of perfection. As the seal landed, there was even the sound of Buddha's voice descending, and the bright ruler's angry roar rang out. Under the powerful storm of stellar energy, everyone in the vicinity dodged to the side, even Fang Qishao. He put away the mischievous smile on his face and his expression became extremely solemn. He had experienced Zhongxian's power before. Although it was not a battle of life and death, he was the one at a disadvantage. Even if Fang Qishao gave it his all, he was not confident that he could defeat Zhongxian. Seventh young master Fang's karma swordsmanship could be said to be unparalleled. Not to mention martial artists of the same level, even many martial Dao grandmasters and powerhouses of the true fire spirit refinement state in the pugilistic world could not successfully comprehend it. However, the karma swordsmanship was not invincible. At the very least, when he was fighting Zhongxian, Fang Qishao was completely suppressed by Zhongxian. It was a complete suppression in terms of power. The karma swordsmanship had a cause and effect. Fang Qishao's sword had indeed stabbed Zhongxian, but his sword could not hurt Zhongxian. This was undoubtedly a terrifying thing, which was why Fang Qishao thought that Zhongxian was a freak. Now that he saw Zhongxian again, Fang Qishao did not feel that Zhongxian's strength had improved significantly. However, Chu Xiu surprised him a little. Previously, when Chu Xiu fought with Fang Qishao on floating Jade Mountain, Chu Xiu had only displayed his equally mysterious karma swordsmanship. It was only now that Fang Qishao realized that Chu Xiu's power was also extremely terrifying in a head-on confrontation. Unfortunately, Chu Xiu's opponent was Zhongxian, an existence that even Fang Qishao called a freak. In the fierce collision, Chu Xiu's demon saber collapsed, and he could not help but retreat step by step. With every step he took, the ground under his feet would explode and form a pit that was several feet wide. After retreating more than 10 steps, Chu Xiu's face turned pale, and even his internal organs could not withstand the powerful force. It was an extremely pure and powerful force. Zhongxian's expression did not change at all, but the Buddhist light in his eyes grew stronger. He stared at Chu Xiu, and his movements paused for a moment. This might be Zhongxian's expression of surprise. He was surprised that Chu Xiu could actually block his seal. However, Zhongxian dropped another seal. This time, the Buddhist light that filled the sky condensed into a Dharma idol that appeared behind Zhongxian. It was surrounded by Buddhist flames, and it glared angrily. The angry Akalanatha seal. The Buddhist light burned the world, and as the angry Akalanatha seal fell, the surrounding air began to ripple. The chi of heaven and earth was stirred up, and this overbearing force could not tolerate any foreign things. Chu Xiu roared angrily, and a powerful aura emerged from his body. All the gang chi condensed into one, and he was as immovable as a mountain, invincible. Under the Dugu seal, the stellar energy shield around Chu Xiu's body seemed to have condensed into a solid form. However, under the enraged Akala seal, the stellar energy shield shattered with a loud bang. It did not even manage to resist for a breath of time. However, at the moment when the Gang Chi shield shattered, all the killing intent around Chu Xiu condensed to the extreme, and even the last trace of clarity in his mind was swallowed by the boundless killing intent. There was nothing in the world that could not be killed. When the killing intent reached a crazy level, and even to the point of forgetting oneself, this was the real oblivious killing fist. The might of that punch was too extreme. So, ever since Chu Xiu had obtained the sky-decimating earth-extinguishing oblivion killing fist, he had never unleashed the might of that move to such a pinnacle degree. And now, Zhongxian had successfully forced Chu Xiu to use that punch. The fists collided, and the boundless killing intent and the Buddhist light seal suddenly scattered. The ground under their feet began to crack inch by inch, and even stretched for hundreds of feet. Looking at a small area, it looked like an earth dragon turning over. In the Gangqi storm caused by the collision, Chu Xiu's figure retreated step by step, and the crazy killing intent in his eyes was dispelled because his power was almost exhausted. A strand of blood flowed from Chu Xiu's mouth as he looked at Zhong Xian with a trace of astonishment in his eyes. Power. Zhong Xian was only good at power, so in this aspect, Zhong Xian had even surpassed some martial Dao masters. All along, Chu Xiu had been using power to crush others, and now it was finally someone else's turn to use power to crush him. This feeling was indeed a little unpleasant. On the other side, Zhong Xian raised his right hand, and the Buddhist light in his eyes was a little dimmer than before. On his right hand, the skin that seemed to be cast with steel had cracks at this time, as if it had been cut by a net of knives. That was caused by Chu Xiutian's despair annihilation selfless killing fist. When the killing intent reached the extreme, it would be sharper than the edge of a knife. Under that punch, Chu Xiu vomited blood, and Zhong Xian suffered some superficial injuries. At first glance, it seemed that Chu Xiu was defeated, but he did not suffer a loss, because his opponent was Zhong Xian, who was one realm higher than him, so Chu Xiu's defeat was not shameful. The warriors present who were a little dissatisfied with Chu Xiu did not see anything wrong with Zhong Xian at this time. They only saw that Zhong Xian made Chu Xiu vomit blood with 2 moves. This guy was so arrogant before, but now he had seen his power, right? At this moment, Xiao Baiyu frowned and said, "Zhong Xian, that's enough. Since you are here to welcome Master Tam Yuan on behalf of the Great Light Temple, you are losing the face of your Buddhism by fighting here." The expression on Zhong Xian's face did not change at all, but he did not continue to fight. 2 bright king seals are enough. I didn't want to fight again, otherwise, you can't stop me. Zhong Xian's words were very arrogant, but his expression when looking at Xiao Baiyu was still the same, without the slightest change, as if he was just stating a fact. Xiao Baiyu was not angry. He was still very tolerant, especially because he knew that what Zhong Xian said was likely to be a fact. Whether in Jianghu or in the Eastern Qi imperial court, Xiao Baiyu was not famous for his absolute strength. He was famous only because of his insights on martial arts and his identity as the Chancellor of Jixia Academy. In fact, if they really fought, Xiao Baiyu would definitely not be defeated, but he could not stop Zhong Xian from fighting with Chu Xiu. After that, Zhong Xian walked straight back and looked in the direction of Donghai. Even if there were other Buddhist disciples around him who greeted him, Zhong Xian seemed not to hear them. Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows, threw an elixir into his mouth, and chewed it casually as if he were chewing candy. His internal organs suffered some minor injuries, but they were not too serious. Chu Xiu was not a sore loser. Zhong Xian's strength was indeed very strong. Chu Xiu suspected that Zhong Xian now had the strength to challenge a Wu Dao Grand Master. Although he was defeated by Zhong Xian in 2 moves, Chu Xiu was not depressed. Zhong Xian hadn't used his full strength, and neither had Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu had only lost to Zhong Xian in terms of pure strength, and Chu Xiu wasn't only good at brute force. Of course, the most important thing was that Chu Xiu was still in the 5 Qis collecting in Yuan realm, while Zhong Xian had reached the oneness of heaven and human beings realm. Although the oneness of heaven and human beings realm was only 1 realm lower than the 5 Qis collecting in Yuan realm, it was a world of difference for the current Chu Xiu. Once he stepped into the oneness of heaven and human beings realm, Chu Xiu's strength would definitely skyrocket. At that time, although it would still be hard to tell who would win between him and Zhong Xian, at least Chu Xiu would not be defeated so easily. Moreover, Chu Xiu was not too far away from this realm. He only needed an opportunity to step into the oneness of heaven and human beings realm. At that moment, Fang Qi Shao sneaked back to Chu Xiu's side and said in a low voice, "I've said it before. This guy is a freak. His martial arts are stubborn, and he's also extremely stubborn when it comes to doing things. I'm very curious if the Great Light Temple will let such a person become the abbot in the future. TSK, that scene is simply unimaginable. Chu Xiu glanced at Fang Qi Shao. If Sword King's city dared to choose someone like him as the successor to take over Sword King's city in the future, why couldn't Zhong Xian become the successor of the Great Light Temple's abbot in the future? Even someone like Fang Qi Shao dared to mock Zhong Xian. One could imagine how good this guy felt about himself. Chapter 466. Fang Qi Shao kept nagging in Chu Xiu's ear. This person's chatterbox was definitely a kind of illness. It was as if he would suffocate to death if he didn't speak for a day. Chu Xiu was also annoyed by his nagging, so he suddenly said, I have seen Zhong Xian's strength. It is indeed terrifying. Now I am not as good as him. What about Zhang Qingzhen, who is ranked first on the Longhu list? Have you ever fought with him? Did you win or lose? Fang Qi Shao was suddenly stunned by Chu Xiu's question, and then his expression became listless. He snorted and said, anyway, they are all monsters. However, that guy Zhang Qingzhen is easier to talk to than Zhong Xian. Like Zhong Xian, it is impossible to communicate with him at all. Chu Xiu did not speak. He looked at Fang Qi Shao's expression and knew that he should have fought with Zhang Qingzhen, or rather, they had learned from each other. Moreover, he had lost, and lost very badly. Otherwise, if he could take advantage of him, with Fang Qi Shao's character, he would be able to boast about it. Speaking of Zhang Qingzhen, Chu Xiu also seemed to have noticed that this time, when they came to welcome Master Tam Yuan, there was not even a martial artist from the 4 major Taoist sects present, let alone the people from the 4 major Taoist sects. However, when he thought about it, it was normal. After all, Master Tam Yuan was a Buddhist holy monk. The contradiction between Taoism and Buddhism had always existed. Even if Master Tam Yuan was now a famous Buddhist holy monk in Jianghu, no one from the Taoist sects would come to welcome him. Otherwise, wouldn't it be destroying their prestige? Therefore, for this matter, the Taoist sect simply pretended not to know anything. From the beginning, not even a single person came. Just as everyone was waiting bitterly on the dragon-facing beach, a huge ship broke through the waves in the distance. There was even a lifelike giant whale embroidered on the sail. The giant whale was the symbol of the Cetacean Society, the largest chamber of commerce among the dozens of islands in the Eastern Sea. The Cetacean Society traveled between Eastern Qi and the Eastern Sea. Although it was not the most powerful force in the Eastern Sea, it was the most financially powerful chamber of commerce. At this moment, on the bow of the giant ship, an old monk stared at a piece of land that looked like a black line. His eyes revealed a complicated and nostalgic expression. This old monk was really old. His eyebrows and beard were already gray, and the wrinkles on his face looked like they could squash a fly. He was wearing an ordinary gray monk's robe, which was also patched up. The only thing on his body that was relatively eye-catching was the string of Buddhist beads hanging around his neck. The surface was incomparably brilliant, and the Buddha's aura was naturally produced. At first glance, one could tell that it was not an ordinary item. This old monk was the famous Vedanta of the Buddhist sect, who was regarded as a Buddha by the entire Eastern Sea, holy monk Tan Yuan. At this moment, looking at the land of Eastern Qi, Master Tam Yuan's heart was stirred. There were countless emotions in his heart, but in the end, they all turned into a long sigh. He left home when he was young and returned when he was old. When Master Tam Yuan left Eastern Qi, he was not young anymore. When he returned, he was not old, but he was already dying. In fact, Master Tam Yuan was not too old. He had just passed 100 years this year. A martial Dao master's lifespan was 300 years. Even if Master Tam Yuan had only stayed in the true fire spirit refinement state for a day, it was not a problem for him to maintain the 300 years of lifespan of a martial Dao master. However, it was a pity that Master Tam Yuan had been spreading Buddhism in the Eastern Sea all these years, dispelling hostility and hatred. He had also fought with many people, and sometimes he even fought against a large force alone. For a long time, his body was full of internal injuries. Although he still retained the strength of a martial Dao master, his lifespan was close to exhaustion. Master Tan Yuan was a martial Dao grandmaster, yet he ended up in such a state. In the eyes of outsiders, it didn't seem worth it, but in Master Tan Yuan's eyes, he had never regretted it. There must be something in life that was worth persevering for. In the past, when Master Tam Yuan was middle-aged, he went overseas to spread Buddhism and dispelled hostility and hatred. At that time, even Master Tam Yuan himself was very confused. A person had 100 years of life, and the first half of Master Tam Yuan's life was very mediocre. His martial arts aptitude was mediocre, and his Buddhism aptitude was mediocre. He was born in a small temple, and perhaps he would spend the rest of his life like that. But for some reason, even Master Tan Yuan himself did not know why he had suddenly come up with the idea of crossing the sea east back then. Perhaps it was a moment of impulse, or perhaps it was a thought that he had hidden deep in his heart for many years. Now that several decades had passed, although the overseas region had yet to be completely bathed in the Buddhist Dharma, there were already temples of various sizes built. Originally, the various islands would fight to the death because of the conflict of interests, and many of the enmity had been resolved by him. Monk Tan Yuan, who was unknown in the past, had also become the current holy monk Tan Yuan. Lowering his head and sighing, Master Tam Yuan took out a jade slip from his bosom and played with it. This was something given to him by his good friend, Daoist Tian Shu of the East Sea Ling Ao Island, to help him find a disciple. In fact, when it came to martial arts, Master Tam Yuan was not too obsessed. Martial arts was the way to stop war. It was not that Master Tam Yuan had not killed people before, but the number of people he had saved was 10 times or even 1,000 times more than the number of people he had killed. Therefore, when he was in the East Sea, Master Tam Yuan had not had the time to find a disciple. It was only now that he realized that he did not have much lifespan left, that he had the idea of looking for a successor. With Master Tam Yuan's reputation in the East Sea, it was very easy for him to find a disciple, but unfortunately, he was not satisfied with any of these people. Master Tam Yuan did not have high requirements for a disciple. It did not matter if the other party was not a monk, they could be a disciple of another sect, or even a Taoist priest. However, Master Tam Yuan's only hope was that his martial arts could be used to save people, not to kill. Good and evil were not things that could be seen just by looking at one's reputation and appearance. Sometimes, a great evil person's benevolence could save thousands of people. As for the young martial artists in the East Sea, Master Tam Yuan could only see their dedication to martial arts, and the so-called good and evil were put at the end. Therefore, this time, Master Tam Yuan was prepared to return to his roots in the Central Plains and choose a disciple at the same time. Unfortunately, there was not much time left for him. Therefore, even though the Central Plains was a place of outstanding people, there was not much time left for him to choose a test. Therefore, Tan Yuan asked Taoist Tian Shu for such a jade slip. Tian Shu Taoist was a rogue cultivator in the East Sea on Ling Ao Island. He was very famous. Although he had the cultivation of a martial arts grand master, he was really famous for his divination skills. It was strange for a monk to become friends with a Taoist priest, but Master Tam Yuan and Tian Shu Taoist were good friends. They exchanged and chatted together, and never had any differences between Taoism and Buddhism. You are you, Buddhism is Buddhism, and Taoism is Taoism. They had no relationship, so it could be said that they could see through each other very clearly. Knowing that his old friend did not have long to live, Tian Shu Taoist was also very sad. Therefore, he used his strongest power to divine a disciple who met Master Tam Yuan's requirements, and gave him 4 comments: every road is covered by a canopy, and it is difficult to guard a hidden dragon's heart. The finishing touch gathers the wind and clouds, like a moth darting into a flame, to turn the tide. The meaning of the comments was very obvious. This time, the disciple that Master Tam Yuan wanted should be from the imperial court. The word official was covered by a canopy, and as long as it was an official, it meant that the disciple was from the imperial court. This time, when Master Tam Yuan stepped into the Central Plains, he would definitely meet a martial artist from the imperial court. The hidden dragon's heart was difficult to guard. A hidden dragon's heart referred to the fact that the other party was still a hidden dragon, and he was not famous. Even he did not know where his future was. The finishing touch gathers the wind and clouds referred to Master Tam Yuan himself. He passed the cultivation method to the other party, just like the finishing touch, and gave the other party the strength to gather the wind and clouds, and laugh at the world. And finally, like a moth darting into a flame, to turn the tide, it meant that the other party would be like a moth darting into a flame in the future, and save thousands of people, like a moth darting into a flame. Moreover, Jianghu Daoist was afraid that the comments were a little vague, which would cause Master Tam Yuan to choose the wrong person. Therefore, Jianghu Daoist exchanged a mouthful of his essence and blood for a vague heaven secret, and sealed it in the jade slip. As long as Master Tam Yuan met the person related to the comments, the jade slip would shine, and it was a double guarantee that there would be no mistakes. If Chu Xiu were here, he would almost understand why Master Tam Yuan finally chose Li Yuan. This was cause and effect, and also fate. Li Yuan was from the Eastern Qi imperial court. This time, if he did not die, he would definitely follow the crown prince to welcome Master Tam Yuan. In this way, he would meet the first condition. Li Yuan was not famous, and he was naturally a little confused about his future, which was also in line with the second condition. The last two conditions referred to Li Yuan's future. After receiving the inheritance of Master Tam Yuan, he was indeed like the finishing touch, and completely gathered the wind and clouds, and soared to the sky. And the last condition referred to Li Yuan, when Eastern Qi was weak and in danger, like a moth darting into a flame, he fought against the Northern Yen like a moth darting into a flame, and finally turned the tide, and became the Northern Zhenbei king and general of Eastern Qi. The reason why Jianghu Daoist predicted that the disciple was Li Yuan, who was also stained with blood in the late stage, was because of cause and effect. Karma was a very mysterious thing. Even if it was good or evil, it couldn't be used to distinguish the cause and effect. Sometimes, doing a good deed could lead to greater evil. Sometimes, killing a person could save more people. If Li Yuan did not turn the tide for Eastern Qi in the future, the Northern Yen would definitely break through Eastern Qi. However, a starving camel was still bigger than a horse, and Eastern Qi, which was located in the hinterland of the Central Plains, was naturally not that easy to destroy. It would definitely fight with the Northern Yen to the end, and at that time, West Chu would definitely intervene, taking advantage of the chaos. In this way, the war between the three countries would repeat, and rivers of blood would flow in the world. If Li Yuan turned the tide, he could make the Northern Yen retreat, and control the war to a certain extent, not giving West Chu a chance to intervene. In this way, although there would be casualties, there would undoubtedly be more people alive. However, no matter what, Li Yuan's existence had reduced the number of killings in the three kingdoms. Although he had killed a lot of people, he had also indirectly saved thousands of people. Therefore, in Jianghu Daoist's deduction, Li Yuan was undoubtedly the one who met the requirements. Chapter 467. While everyone on the shore was waiting anxiously, the Cetacean Society's warship was about to reach the shore. At this time, a well-dressed middle-aged man walked behind Master Tam Yuan and whispered, "Master, we're almost there." Master Tam Yuan turned around and smiled, "Master Long, sorry to trouble you." The middle-aged man hurriedly said, "Master, please don't say that. If it weren't for you in the past, the Cetacean Society would have been annexed by the East China Sea's 3 evil islands. Master Long has been protecting the East China Sea all these years, reducing the number of killings in the East China Sea. It's a pity that good people don't live long. Now that you're leaving, I'm afraid the East China Sea won't have many peaceful days. At this point, the middle-aged man's eyes turned red and he looked sad. This middle-aged man was the Cetacean Society's leader, Long Tianying. He was considered a figure in the East China Sea. However, a businessman was a businessman after all. Even if he had some strength, it was quite difficult for him to develop the Cetacean Society to such a level. Thanks to Master Tam Yuan's protection in the past, the Cetacean Society was able to develop to its current scale. Therefore, Long Tianying was really sad that Master Tam Yuan was about to pass away. Master Tam Yuan smiled and said, "Master Long, you don't have to be like this. Life and death are fated. This is the cycle of reincarnation. It can't be changed. Whether good or bad, they can't escape this. However, the East China Sea's order has been established. As long as everyone can abide by the rules and not kill the innocent, the East China Sea will still be the East China Sea. It's the same principle with or without this old monk." Long Tianying nodded. However, he knew that the East China Sea didn't have a respected expert like Master Tam Yuan to maintain order. It was estimated that there wouldn't be many peaceful days left. By then, the Cetacean Society's warship had reached the shore. Master Tam Yuan took a step forward and hovered in the air. The surrounding power of heaven and earth gently lifted Master Tam Yuan's body, allowing him to gently land on the shore. When everyone present saw this, they rushed forward and said loudly, "Welcome back to the Central Plains." At this moment, whether it was the Crown Prince and Xiao Baiyu who represented the imperial court, the two Wu Dao Grand Masters of Sabodi Zen Monastery, or Wisdom King Zhongshuan, they all lowered their heads. Whether it was true or false, the current Master Tam Yuan was worthy of their respect. Master Tam Yuan waved his hand and said, "Everyone, there's no need to be like this. What holy monk? They're all mortals. Who has the qualifications to become a god or a saint? At the very least, I, this old monk, am not worthy of her. This time, I've returned to the Central Plains because I want to find a lonely grave in my hometown to bury. It can be considered as returning to my roots. I've offended all of you by making such a big fuss." To be able to be a monk to the level of Master Tam Yuan was considered to have reached the extreme. Martial artists from other small temples were not qualified to be welcomed by the people of Sabodi Zen Monastery and Great Light Temple. At this moment, a Wu Dao Grand Master of Sabodi Zen Monastery stood up and bowed. "Senior Brother Tam Yuan, the abbot has instructed before he came that he wants to invite Senior Brother Tam Yuan to Sabodi Zen Monastery as a guest to preach. Therefore, please come with us. Our Sabodi Zen Monastery will definitely entertain you." He could not tell who was the senior between the monk from Sabodi Zen Monastery and Tam Yuan. However, with Master Tam Yuan's current status, it would definitely not be wrong to call him Senior Brother. Zhong Xian, who was at the side, also said, "When we came, Su Ci also instructed that we must invite Master Tam Yuan to preach at Great Light Temple." Master Tam Yuan smiled bitterly and shook his head. "I appreciate the Great Light Temple and Sabodi Zen Monastery's kindness, but I'll pass on this preaching. Actually, how can I preach anything? My attainments in the Dharma are definitely not as good as the eminent monks of Great Light Temple and Sabodi Zen Monastery. The so-called preaching of the Dharma in the Eastern Sea is actually just explaining some superficial principles to them and reciting some Buddhist scriptures to them. I'm slow-witted, so I can't understand some of the Buddhist principles. Therefore, most of the time, I don't use the Dharma to resolve the enmity, but force. When both sides want to fight, I beat them up until they have no strength left. Then, I recite the Buddhist scriptures to them until they are really impatient. Naturally, the enmity between both sides will disappear." As soon as he said that, everyone present was stunned, especially the old monks from Sabodi Zen Monastery. How were they supposed to respond? Although it was said that violence was more effective than reasoning in a place like the Eastern Sea, Master Tam Yuan had said it so directly. This made the martial artists from Sabodi Zen Monastery feel a little degraded. This was completely different from what they had imagined. Chu Xiu, who was at the back, felt that this Master Tam Yuan was quite understanding. Whether it was Buddhism or Taoism, people had to listen to what you said before it could be spread. If a powerless monk wanted to spread the Dharma and resolve enmity, he would most likely be killed by a knife. Actually, Great Light Temple and Sabodi Zen Monastery knew this as well. Otherwise, they would not have put so much effort into martial arts. If they had the time, they would have used it to study the Dharma. However, although they knew this, they did not want to admit it. When they were outside, they still said that they were monks who were compassionate and wanted to convince people with virtue. It was very hypocritical. Seeing that the expressions of the monks from Sabodi Zen Monastery were a little off, Master Tam Yuan smiled bitterly and shook his head. Everyone, it's not that I don't want to give you face, but I really can't walk anymore. Before I came to the Central Plains, my lifespan was already starting to run out. I'm afraid I'll die before I even reach Great Light Temple or Sabodi Zen Monastery. Therefore, during this last period of time, I won't be leaving Eastern Qi. I just want to return to my roots in the land of Eastern Qi. Master Tam Yuan did not mention that he wanted to find a disciple, because once he did, the young talents of the entire pugilistic world would swarm over. By then, it might cause some impact. According to the divination given to him by Taoist Tian Shu, he would definitely meet a suitable disciple when he returned to the Central Plains this time. There was no need to force it. Meanwhile, when the monks from Sabodi Zen Monastery saw that Master Tam Yuan had rejected them, they did not say anything else. Since Master Tam Yuan was unwilling, they naturally would not force him. And with Zhong Xian's character, he would not say anything else. In any case, he would say whatever the abbot wanted him to say. Zhong Xian had already said what the abbot wanted him to say, so at this time, Zhong Xian stood at the side like a statue, not saying a word. At this time, Crown Prince Lv Longji walked over and asked his subordinates to take out a few gifts. He cupped his hands and said, "Since Master Tam Yuan is unwilling to go to Great Light Temple or Sabodi Zen Monastery, then you can stay in Qi for a while." Imperial Father had once said that it was an honor for the Great Qi Kingdom to have someone like Grandmaster Tan Yuan appear in the Great Qi Kingdom. Therefore, we must invite Grandmaster Tan Yuan to Great Liang City. Imperial Father will personally receive you. Father also said that when the time comes, he will personally build a temple for you in Great Liang City. He will also erect monuments for you in other places in Qi. Master Tam, you went to the east to spread Buddhism and spread the name of the Central Plains. It can be said that you are a role model for the people of Qi. Qi will never forget you. Lv Longji's words made some of the martial artists who were not from Eastern Qi frown. What did he mean by this? How could Master Tam Yuan represent Eastern Qi? In fact, for people in Jianghu, the boundaries between countries were not that important. The 5 major sword sects were located in 3 different countries. Were they going to fight and kill each other? The imperial court and Jianghu were natural opposites. Moreover, some of the sects and aristocratic families had existed for thousands of years. At that time, there were no countries like Eastern Qi and Northern Yen. Master Tam Yuan was speechless by Lv Longji's enthusiasm. In fact, his return to the Central Plains this time was simply to return to his roots. He wanted to find a disciple to inherit his martial arts. Everything would be perfect. Unfortunately, in Jianghu, there were some things that could not be avoided. In the past, when he traveled east alone, there wasn't even a single person to send him off. Even his fellow disciples thought that he was crazy and that he wouldn't be able to return once he left. However, compared with the time when he left, there were so many people when he came back. This made Master Tam Yuan a little uncomfortable. However, when Master Tam Yuan was about to refuse, he suddenly remembered that the disciple he was looking for was from the imperial court. This time, the Eastern Qi imperial court sent so many people to welcome him, which was in line with what Tianshu Taoist had said. LV Longji had brought a lot of people with him, nearly 100 of them. Among them, there were also many martial artists of the younger generation. However, when Master Tan Yuan glanced over, the jade slip in his arms did not shine. This also made Master Tan Yuan feel a little strange. Could it be that that person was not here? He had never doubted the jade slip. This was the secret of heaven condensed by his old friend Tianshu Taoist with a mouthful of essence and blood. It was absolutely impossible for it to be wrong. But at this moment, Chu Xiu squeezed to the front, took out a box and handed it to Master Tam Yuan, saying, "Master Tam Yuan, I am Chu Xiu. I am here to welcome Master Tam Yuan on behalf of the second prince. The second prince can't come because of something, but he asked me to bring a gift. Please don't take it to heart, Master." Seeing Chu Xiu suddenly intervene, LV Longji's face suddenly became extremely gloomy. He should have taught Chu Xiu a lesson regardless of Xiao Baiyu's face. He had not thought about why Chu Xiu would appear here before. It was not until now that he realized that Chu Xiu was here to help his second brother build his reputation. This time, it was his privilege as the crown prince to welcome Master Tam Yuan. He did not expect that his second brother did not even want to let go of this opportunity and specially sent someone to make trouble for him. However, at this time, no one noticed that Master Tam Yuan looked at Chu Xiu with a strange look in his eyes. Because when Chu Xiu approached the jade slip in his arms, it shone with a glimmer of light. Although it was only a very weak glimmer, it did shine because of Chu Xiu's approach. Chapter 468. The jade slip glowed, which meant that Master Tam Yuan had met the right person. However, Master Tam Yuan did not say anything, because he still had some doubts. The glow of the jade slip was too weak. It could only be called a glimmer, not a glow at all. Could it be that Tianshu Taoist had used the wrong words? As long as the jade slip glowed, it meant that he had met the disciple he wanted, instead of the glowing jade slip as he had imagined. At this time, Master Tam Yuan did not know that Tianshu Taoist had said that the jade slip would glow when it touched the existence related to the disciple he had predicted. If Li Yuan were here, the jade slip would definitely shine brightly, and there would be no doubt about it. But now that Li Yuan was dead, there was no one in the world who could make the jade slip shine brightly. So now, who was the closest person to Li Yuan in terms of karma? It was not even Li Yuan's parents, but Chu Xiu, who had killed Li Yuan. In this way, the jade slip glowed after touching Chu Xiu, although it was only a weak glow. Because the glow was too weak, Master Tam Yuan was not sure about Chu Xiu. He took the box from Chu Xiu and said in a low voice, "May I ask what is your official position under the second prince, Chu?" Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "Master Tam Yuan, you misunderstood. Although I am here on behalf of the second prince, I am not from the Eastern Qi Imperial Court. I am the Guanxi penal officer of the Guanzhong torture room." Hearing this, Master Tam Yuan frowned slightly. He was not from the Imperial Court? Could it be that there was something wrong with the jade slip? Moreover, Master Tam Yuan had been away from the Central Plains for decades. His impression of the Guanzhong torture room was still the time when Chu Kuanga had just become famous in Jianghu. At that time, although the Guanzhong torture room had an outstanding figure like Chu Kuanga, it was only Chu Kuanga who was famous, not the whole Guanzhong torture room. At this time, the leader of the Cetacean Society, Long Tianying, also got off the boat and stood respectfully behind Master Tam Yuan. Long Tianying Cetacean Society traveled between the East Sea and the Central Plains of Eastern Qi. They were very well informed about the Central Plains during their trade. They were almost the same as the warriors of the Central Plains. Therefore, Master Tam Yuan immediately sent a voice transmission to inquire about the Guanzhong torture room and Chu Xiu. Hearing this, Long Tianying was stunned. Although he was a little puzzled as to why Master Tam Yuan wanted the news of Chu Xiu, since Master Tam Yuan asked, Long Tianying immediately told Master Tam Yuan everything he knew truthfully. After listening to it, Master Tam Yuan also frowned. After thinking about it, Chu Xiu was somewhat similar to the image in the comments, but it was also not the same. However, after thinking about it carefully, it made some sense. Lu Feng's two mouths were covered by the imperial canopy. This was the word official. When it was mentioned, Master Tam Yuan subconsciously thought that the other party was someone from the imperial court. It should be said that this was everyone's subconscious reaction. However, now that Master Tam Yuan realized that the comments were only the word official and not the imperial court, it seemed that one could also be an official without being in the imperial court. For example, Chu Xiu's current position was the Guanxi penal officer, which corresponded with the word official. As for the hidden dragon in the abyss, it was difficult to abide by the rules. Now that Chu Xiu was ranked 6th on the Longhu leaderboard, it was probably not appropriate to say that he was a hidden dragon. However, if one were to think about it carefully, although Chu Xiu was ranked 6th on the Longhu leaderboard, there was still a huge gap between him and the top 5 on the Longhu leaderboard. Although Chu Xiu was the most outstanding disciple of the Guanzhong torture room's younger generation, be it outsiders or Guanxiu, they did not treat Chu Xiu as the successor of the Guanzhong torture room. However, some people speculated that there was a certain possibility that Chu Xiu would inherit the Guanzhong torture room. As for Zhang Chengzhen, Zhong Xian, and the rest, even from their childhood, their fates were already determined. As long as they did not die, they would be the successor of the sect leader or the abbot. They were destined to be the overlords of the pugilistic world in the future. Therefore, compared to them, the current Chu Xiu was considered a hidden dragon with an uncertain future. Master Tam Yuan pondered for a moment and suddenly asked, "Chu, you are now the torturer of the Guanzhong torture room and ranked 6th on the Longhu leaderboard. What do you think of your future?" Hearing Master Tam Yuan's question, everyone present was stunned. There were so many people waiting to invite Master Tam Yuan, and there was also the Crown Prince, Lv Longji, and Zhong Xian, who was also a young talent of the Buddhist sect. In the end, Master Tam Yuan pulled Chu Xiu over to chat. What was going on? No matter how they thought about it, they couldn't tell just what virtue or ability this Chu Xiu had to be able to obtain Master Tam Yuan's favor. Could it be because of the gift that Chu Xiu had received? However, something was not right. The box had not even been opened. How could Master Tam Yuan know what was inside? Even Chu Xiu was in a daze. It was true that he was prepared to snatch Li Yuan's opportunity. Therefore, from the beginning, Chu Xiu had planned to get close to Master Tam Yuan and strike up a conversation with him. However, he did not expect Master Tam Yuan to take the initiative to talk to him. Could it be that he was really lucky and could immediately replace Li Yuan after killing him? However, after a short moment of shock, Chu Xiu immediately calmed down. He was not arrogant enough to think that he was the son of luck and that if he stood still, there would be an opportunity falling on him. Although he did not know why Master Tam Yuan asked this question, Chu Xiu subconsciously leaned towards Li Yuan's way of thinking. What should Li Yuan's future be like now? According to Chu Xiu's analysis, his future could only be described as uncertain. Although he was the son of the High Duke and the Crown Prince's confidant, the Lin Duke's residence had already declined. He was not the only confidant of the Crown Prince and he was not the most trusted person. Most importantly, the Crown Prince's future was uncertain. There was Lu Haochang who refused to give up his position and Lu Longguang who was pressuring him. Therefore, Lu Longji, the Crown Prince's future was uncertain, let alone someone who was attached to the Crown Prince. Therefore, Chu Xiu also harbored such a feeling. He sighed and said, Master Tam Yuan must be joking. How could a person of my background have any opinions? I, Chu Xiu, was born in the wilderness. My reputation in the Jianghu is mixed. I don't have the support of my sect's inheritance. Back then, I was hunted to the point where I had nowhere to go. Fortunately, I was taken in by the Guanzhong Disciplinary Hall, which made things a little safer. Now, I can only take one step at a time. Hearing Chu Xiu's words, everyone present subconsciously furrowed their brows. Both good and bad? Did you, Chu Xiu, have a good reputation in the pugilistic world? Hearing Chu Xiu's words, Master Tam Yuan's eyes lit up. This Chu Xiu's current state of mind was in line with the second sentence of the comment. Since he lacked an inheritance, now that Master Tam Yuan had given him an inheritance, it was the finishing touch, gathering wind and clouds. As for the last sentence of the comment that predicted the future, Master Tam Yuan also found a reason. The Guanzhong torture room was located in the land of 3 countries and its location was extremely sensitive. In the past, Chu Xiu was able to fight against an army of 10,000 and stop the war with force. If the 3 countries were to go to war again in the future, Chu Xiu's strength would increase greatly after obtaining his inheritance. It was very likely that he would do the same thing as Chu Kuanga, or even better, stop the war between the 3 countries and save countless people. It had to be said that sometimes coincidences happen like this. What happened to Chu Xiu was only slightly similar to the comment, but Master Tam Yuan forcefully deduced 80% of it based on these clues. Coupled with the jade slip that was still emitting a faint glow, no one in the pugilistic world was more in line with Master Tam Yuan's requirements than Chu Xiu. However, Master Tam Yuan was a person who was about to die after all. He only had one chance to choose an inheritor. Although Chu Xiu was very in line with the jade slip and the comment's requirements, intuition told Master Tam Yuan that he still needed to be more cautious. However, at this moment, Master Tam Yuan's internal organs felt a sharp pain. Although he looked fine on the outside, his internal organs had already begun to turn upside down. Master Tam Yuan's lips suddenly revealed a bitter smile. It seemed that he did not even have the chance to choose carefully. His internal injuries had erupted more severely than he had imagined. Originally, Master Tam Yuan thought that he could hold on for a few months, but now it seemed that it would be difficult for him to even hold on for a few days. Master Tam Yuan cultivated Buddhist techniques. Although it was not as powerful as the Great Light Temple's body-refining techniques, it was not weak either. However, all these years, Master Tam Yuan had been constantly running around and fighting, causing the internal injuries in his body to become more and more severe. At this moment, he was already on the verge of collapse and could not hold on any longer. His body no longer gave Master Tam Yuan the chance to choose. He glanced at the jade slip that was still emitting a faint glow in his hand. Master Tam Yuan said to Chu Xiu in a deep voice, "Chu, this time I came to the Central Plains to return to my roots. However, I do not want to bring my martial arts to the soil. Therefore, I want to find someone to pass on my martial arts, so that it can save the world and save people, so that it can become a martial art for saving people, not a technique for killing people. Now, I am going to pass on all my martial arts and the last bit of my skills to you. I do not need you to be my disciple. Between us, we are just teaching, not passing on the way. Do you want to agree?" As soon as this was said, everyone present was stunned. No one had expected Master Tam Yuan to say such a thing. Everyone in the Jianghu knew that Master Tam Yuan did not have any disciples. Even the Great Light Temple and Sabodhi Monastery had so sincerely invited Master Tam Yuan to come to these 2 places to preach. In addition to building up their reputation and admiring Master Tam Yuan, they also had some ulterior motives. Since Master Tam Yuan did not have any disciples, would he leave his martial arts in the Great Light Temple or Sabodhi Monastery during the preaching process? In the end, no one had expected that Master Tam Yuan did not leave his martial arts to the people of Sabodhi Monastery, nor did he leave it to Zhong Xian, the number 1 person in the younger generation of the Buddhist sect in the Jianghu. He actually wanted to leave it to Chu Xiu, who was not related to him and had a bad reputation in the Jianghu. Chapter 469. Master Tam Yuan wanted Chu Xiu to inherit his inheritance. Even Chu Xiu himself did not expect that he would be able to replace Li Yuan so easily and successfully seize the opportunity to transform into a dragon that belonged to Li Yuan. However, before Chu Xiu could say anything, the people around him were already agitated. They would not care if Chu Xiu obtained an inheritance of the demonic path, but how could a holy monk like Master Tam Yuan teach his inheritance to Chu Xiu? In particular, the Buddhist martial artists present were the loudest in their objections. Master Tam Yuan, please reconsider. Chu Xiu is not a good person. You can't give him your inheritance. Yes, please retract your order, holy monk. There are countless talents in our Buddhist sect. Why must you give your inheritance to an outsider? The surrounding Buddhist martial artists were not the only ones who were agitated. Even the two martial Dao masters from Subodhi Monastery frowned, thinking that Master Tam Yuan's action was inappropriate. However, they did not say it out loud like the others. After all, the martial Dao masters from Subodhi Monastery were present, so it was not appropriate for them to directly interfere with Master Tam Yuan's choice. As for Zhong Xian, he would not say a word. To be more arrogant, he did not care about Master Tam Yuan's inheritance at all. Even though Master Tam Yuan was once a powerhouse in the true fire spiritual cultivation state at his peak, he was still a rogue cultivator after all. The true fire spiritual refinement state was strong, but for so many years in the Great Light Temple, there were at least 80, if not 100, strong practitioners of the true fire spiritual refinement state. With so many people, would the inheritance they left behind really be inferior to Master Tam Yuan? With Zhong Xian's status in the Great Light Temple, he could choose any of these inheritance techniques, but Zhong Xian had never even learned them. From the day he started learning martial arts, Zhong Xian had only cultivated the Bright Ruler Seal. He had forcefully cultivated this technique, which was not considered a top-tier technique, to the acme of perfection. The Bright Ruler Seal could transform into tens of thousands of techniques, and its power was much stronger than if he were to learn other inheritances. Master Tam Yuan frowned. The intense reactions of the people around him were somewhat out of his expectations. Just now, the Long Tianying had only mentioned Chu Xiu's identity and other things. He had not mentioned that Chu Xiu's reputation in Jianghu was actually this bad. At this time, LV Longji directly stood up and said indignantly, Master Tam Yuan, this Chu Xiu has a bad reputation in the pugilistic world. He is ruthless and has killed countless people. If you impart your martial arts to such a person, I'm afraid that your reputation will be ruined as soon as you become famous. If you let a person like Chu Xiu obtain your martial arts inheritance, he will only use it to kill people. Why would he use it to save people? When Master Tam Yuan heard that, he immediately frowned. He looked at Chu Xiu and said, Chu, is that really the case? If only one person had said that, Master Tam Yuan would not have believed it. However, now that everyone was saying the same thing, even Master Tam Yuan was a little shaken. Chu Xiu's expression did not change as he said, Master, it's true that I, Chu Xiu, don't have a good reputation in Jianghu, but I've never killed innocent people. In this pugilistic world, it's either people who kill me or I who kill them. If I didn't kill, I wouldn't have reached my current realm and strength. Moreover, when I was the patrol and torture officer of the Guanzhong torture room, the people I killed were all for the sake of order in the Guanzhong torture room, so that more people could live. The previous torture officer of the Guanxi region did not do his job and caused the entire region to be in chaos. All the major factions fought and killed each other, and many people died as well. It was me who used an iron fist to completely control the entire Guanxi region, minimizing the conflicts. Only then did the entire region become increasingly peaceful. Nothing can be accomplished without rules. If I hadn't killed those people, more of them would have died in the future. LV Longji gritted his teeth and said, sophistry. Then what do you say about how you foiled my plans in the southwest and incited the various factions to kill each other? For the sake of my second brother, you also caused no small number of killings in the southwest. Chu Xiu indifferently said, I still say the same thing. Nothing can be accomplished without rules. In the past, there was no ruler in the southwest, so it led to the various factions in the southwest killing each other. Their methods were extremely fierce and cruel. Now that the southwest is under the second prince's control, everyone can no longer kill each other as they please. In the future, there will undoubtedly be fewer deaths. There are gains and losses. In my view, it's very worth it to use those people who died in exchange for the stability of the entire Southwest. But Your Highness, because I foiled your plans in the Southwest, you slander me in front of Master Tam Yuan. I think that the one with bad intentions is you. Master Tam Yuan sank into deep thought. What Chu Xiu had said was actually quite reasonable. For example, in the East Sea, the hatred between the various islands was as deep as the sea. Everyone attacked and killed each other. Even if there was no hatred between them, they would still fight to the death for the sake of profit. Thus, after Master Tam Yuan arrived at the East Sea, his first step was to use force to completely subdue them and then spread the Buddhist Dharma to establish order. However, Master Tam Yuan was only one person, so this process was very long. Even now, the order he established had not yet spread to the entire East Sea. And from a certain perspective, Chu Xiu's methods and Master Tam Yuan's were the same. It was just that Chu Xiu's methods were more ruthless. If Master Tam Yuan was as ruthless as Chu Xiu and directly killed people, the East Sea would have long since quieted down. Master Tam Yuan was not one of those pedantic old Buddhist monks. Everything he did was based on Buddhist scriptures, and he viewed good and evil so simply. In the past, when Master Tam Yuan was preaching in the East Sea, he had encountered something like this. There were 3 islands in the East Sea called the 3 Evil Islands. There were some extremely vicious people who were ruthless and extremely greedy. The master of the 3 Evil Islands, the green-eyed blood demon, Han Dongming, was a famous devil in the East Sea. He did all kinds of evil and was extremely cruel. At that time, Master Tam Yuan had just stepped into the martial arts grandmaster realm. It just so happened that the leader of the Cetacean Society, Long Tianying, had personally asked him for help. Thus, Master Tam Yuan had prepared to get rid of the 3 Evil Islands. As the saying went, capture the ringleader first. Master Tam Yuan had come to the 3 Evil Islands and fought with Han Dongming. He had tried his best to kill him. Just when Master Tam Yuan thought that the ringleader had been killed and the 3 Evil Islands had been completely dealt with, the other villains on the 3 Evil Islands had fled at the sight of him. They had scattered throughout the entire East Sea and caused even more evil consequences. They had killed countless people. In the end, it took Master Tam Yuan a few years to get rid of all the villains on the 3 Evil Islands. In just a few years, this group of people had caused more damage to the East Sea than in the past few decades. This karma was undoubtedly on Master Tam Yuan's head. At the same time, it made Master Tam Yuan blame himself. If it had been other Buddhist martial artists, they would probably not care about anything else after killing Han Dongming and becoming famous in the pugilistic world. However, Master Tam Yuan was reflecting on whether he had done the right thing or not. Han Dongming had committed countless crimes, but he had established the 3 Evil Islands and controlled most of the villains in the East Sea within a certain range, so the threat they posed was limited. However, after he killed Han Dongming, the evil people of the 3 Evil Island lost their restraints and caused even greater destruction. From then on, Master Tam Yuan understood a principle. Sometimes, good and evil could not be seen clearly at a glance. Someone did something that everyone thought was good, but in the end, it caused great evil. Some people seemed to be wicked beyond redemption, but their existence saved countless lives. Karma was the most difficult thing to predict. Therefore, Master Tam Yuan could not decide if he should impart his cultivation technique to Chu Xiu. However, after seeing the glimmering jade slip, Master Tam Yuan made up his mind. He was not good at divination, but he believed in his old friend Daoist Yanxu's attainments in divination. Since the jade slip had glowed after meeting Chu Xiu, it proved that he was the person he had been waiting for. He did not have much time left and could not afford to delay any longer. Therefore, Master Tam Yuan said in a deep voice, "Everyone, there is no need to say anything more. I have made up my mind. Since Chu is willing to be my successor, I might as well impart my martial arts to Chu instead of bringing them to the grave." Seeing how determined Master Tam Yuan was, everyone present immediately revealed confused expressions. LV Longji's expression was even gloomier. The martial arts inheritance belonged to Master Tam Yuan. He could give it to whoever he wanted. How could they snatch it from him? However, LV Longji was still secretly cursing Master Tam Yuan in his heart. It seemed that he had truly become muddle-headed with age. He had such a great reputation overseas in vain, but in the end, he had blindly chosen Chu Xiu as his successor. How could he go about explaining this? Because of the internal injuries in Master Tam Yuan's body, he was afraid that he would not be able to hold on for long. Therefore, he did not want to delay any longer. He turned to Long Tianying behind him and said in a deep voice, "President Long, please help me find a quiet place. I want to impart my cultivation technique to Chu." Not only did the Cetacean Society have businesses in the East Sea, but they also had some businesses in the East Sea County. Hearing this, Long Tianying immediately arranged for Master Tam Yuan and Chu Xiu to an inn that belonged to the Cetacean Society. He directly chased everyone away, leaving only Master Tam Yuan and Chu Xiu. He then personally guarded the door. Seeing that Master Tam Yuan had made up his mind, the monks from the Sabodi monastery could only shake their heads helplessly and leave, including Zong Xian. Abbot Su Ci had only asked Zong Xian to invite Master Tam Yuan to the Great Light Temple to preach. Now that he had said that Master Tam Yuan would not come, his task was naturally considered completed. As for the outside of the inn, there were still many busybodies waiting around. They wanted to see how things would develop. Inside the inn, Master Tam Yuan sat cross-legged and looked directly at Chu Xiu. He said in a deep voice, "Chu, although my cultivation is not considered strong, it is not weak either. Now, I will hand them over to you, but can I trust you?" Chapter 470. Master Tam Yuan stared at Chu Xiu. There was no pressure, only calmness. He had met many people overseas and experienced many things, but he could not see through Chu Xiu. It should be said that the human heart was the most difficult thing to see through. Although the jade slip and the comments had proven that Chu Xiu was the one who met the requirements the most, Master Tam Yuan's intuition told him that something was wrong. Chu Xiu did not directly answer Master Tam Yuan. He only said in a deep voice, "Good and evil are only separated by a single thought. Even if I promise you now, I reckon you won't believe me. The path of martial arts is difficult. I can only promise that I will do what I should do in the future." Master Tam Yuan nodded. Chu Xiu's words made him feel at ease. If Chu Xiu patted his chest and said that he would definitely do good and save people in the future, Master Tam Yuan would not believe him. He had stayed in the East Sea for a long time and had seen many things like human nature being evil. If Chu Xiu pretended to be too hypocritical, it would be very easy for Master Tam Yuan to see through him. Looking at Chu Xiu, Master Tam Yuan said in a deep voice, "I just hope that I didn't make the wrong choice with my cultivation. Chu, don't disappoint this old monk. Now that I have begun the cultivation transfer, I have decided to disperse all my cultivation. A part of it will return to the world. I can't collect this part of the power, so I can only let it drift away. However, I still have a part of extremely pure power that I can inject into your body, Chu, to help you take a step forward. Therefore, you have to be ready later. Empty your mind and prepare to receive my power. Don't worry, this is an extremely pure power. It doesn't contain any impurities, and the amount won't be too great. At the very least, with the strength of your physical body, you can completely control it." After a pause, Master Tam Yuan continued, I've learned a lot of things in my life. I was born in a small temple, and the cultivation techniques I've learned aren't very powerful. I reckon you won't be interested in them. Later on, I obtained quite a number of cultivation techniques in the East Sea. There are strong and weak ones among them. Therefore, I only plan to teach you 2 martial arts. One of them is an ancient cultivation technique that I accidentally found in the East Sea. There are even traces of Tantric Buddhism in it. However, I saw that its power is not weak, so I cultivated it. This cultivation technique is called the sun-shifting technique. The great sun-changing art was derived from the meaning of stealing the heavens and changing the sun. It could seize the fortune of heaven and earth and fuse it into one's body, unleashing one's potential to the extreme. However, its might was powerful, and it was easy to injure others and oneself. The sun of the sun-shifting technique also has the meaning of Vairocana. Changing the sun is to exchange one's state of mind with Vairocana. Therefore, whether your body can withstand the power of Vairocana will depend on you. As for the second technique that I'm going to impart to you, it's the formless sealing palm imprint that I created by gathering countless Buddhist techniques. Form is emptiness, and emptiness is form. When the formless sealing palm is cultivated to the extreme, the 5 skandhas are all emptiness. Life and death gather in the palm, evolving into the myriad worlds of heaven and earth, changing constantly. When speaking of the formless sealing palm, even Master Tam Yuan couldn't help but reveal a hint of pride in his tone. Although the sun-shifting palm was also his main cultivation technique, it was written by predecessors. Even if he learned it, there was nothing to be proud of. On the other hand, the formless sealing palm was created by Master Tam Yuan himself. In Master Tam Yuan's opinion, it was the condensation of his lifelong martial Tao. Master Tam Yuan put his palms together, and his body emitted spots of Buddhist light. He said in a deep voice, "Chu, empty your mind. When I transmit these powers to you, the sun-shifting technique and the formless sealing palm will also enter your mind. It also contains some of my cultivation experience, allowing you to skip the cultivation stage after obtaining these 2 cultivation techniques and be able to use them instantly. However, it's something that you didn't cultivate on your own, so its peak is limited. The experience I give you doesn't belong to you, so it can only help you evolve 80% of the charm of the cultivation technique. If you want to walk your own Tao, you still have to rely on yourself." As the Buddhist light around Master Tam Yuan became more and more intense, the light also surged into Chu Xiu's body. This instantly added a lot of things to his mind, and he also felt like his body was about to explode. However, the power really entered Chu Xiu's body as Master Tam Yuan said, causing Chu Xiu to instantly feel as if he had entered another realm. The biggest difference between the unity of heaven and man and the 5 Qis unification was that the power that could be mobilized was different. No matter how strong the 5 Qis unification was, it could only mobilize one's own power. At the unity of heaven and man realm, one's own power had already faintly merged with heaven and earth. When one attacked, one could naturally borrow a trace of the power of heaven and earth. Even if it was just a trace, the power was shocking enough. Of course, whether the borrowed power was strong or not depended on how strong one's understanding of the power and how strong one's control over the power. Otherwise, no matter how much power one borrowed, one would not be able to control it and would only be a waste. At this moment, Chu Xiu was already immersed in a very strange state. Half of his mental power seemed to be in his body, and the other half was in heaven and earth. As the 2 gradually merged, Chu Xiu suddenly opened his eyes. It was as if he had stepped into another world. In such a short time, he had actually stepped into the unity of heaven and man realm. In fact, Chu Xiu already had a vague premonition of stepping into the unity of heaven and man realm. However, at that time, Chu Xiu was still lacking an opportunity. Now, Master Tam Yuan had given him this opportunity. Finally, Chu Xiu could successfully step into this realm, and the process of breaking through could be said to be without any obstacles. This could be attributed to Chu Xiu's stable foundation and deep accumulation. It could also be said that Master Tam Yuan's power was too strong. He was so strong that he had given Chu Xiu so many things without saying a word. However, it was not over yet. Chu Xiu was far from happy. Master Tam Yuan's sun-changing technique and formless sealing palm had not been imparted yet. Compared to the previous power, these two techniques were more important. Therefore, Chu Xiu still did not move. Instead, he directly opened up his mind, allowing the words and Master Tam Yuan's experience to be poured into Chu Xiu's mind. In fact, Master Tam Yuan's actions were very similar to the Tantric sect's enlightenment technique. It could create an expert at an extremely fast speed. The sun-changing technique had a trace of the Tantric sect's aura, and it was not surprising that Master Tam Yuan used a technique similar to the Tantric sect's enlightenment technique. However, Master Tam Yuan imparted everything he knew without reservation, which was a huge damage to his mental power. Now that Master Tam Yuan was nearing the end of his lifespan and was on the verge of death, he felt at ease using this method to pass down his techniques. Meanwhile, over 10 miles away from Dragon Beach, Zhongxian had already started to return to the Great Light Temple. At that moment, a monk in white clothes in his 40s ran over hurriedly from afar. When he saw Zhongxian, his eyes lit up, and he quickly ran over and said, "Martial nephew Zhongxian, have you seen Master Tam Yuan?" Zhongxian looked at the monk in white clothes, put his palms together, and said, "Greetings, Martial Uncle Ming Qi. I've seen Master Tam Yuan, but he refused to come to our Great Light Temple. Where's Master Tam Yuan now?" Ming Qi quickly asked. Zhongxian said, "Master Tam Yuan chose Chu Xiu to be his successor. He's currently imparting his techniques in the inn outside Dragon Beach." Ming Qi slapped his thigh and shouted, "Oh no! I was still a step too late." Master Su Jing deduced that Master Tam Yuan wants to leave his techniques in the Central Plains. If our Great Light Temple can obtain Master Tam Yuan's inheritance, we can successfully obtain Master Tam Yuan's reputation. We can even use this reputation to go to the East Sea to preach. How can you let Master Tam Yuan impart his techniques to someone else while you're there? And it's even Chu Xiu. The Great Light Temple had 3 major Zen halls and 6 major martial academies. Among them, the 3 major Zen halls had the least number of people, but they were the strongest. The Karma Meditation Hall did not focus on martial arts, but the Karma secret techniques of the Buddhist sect. Its master, Venerable Maitreya, Su Jing, was comparable to the divination masters of Taoism in terms of divination and karma deduction. The Maitreya Buddha was the future Buddha, and Su Jing's nickname was Venerable Maitreya. One could imagine how strong his attainments in the karma path were. Moreover, even Abbot Su Ci had to consult Su Jing for most of the Great Light Temple's decisions and let him deduce them before making a decision. Although this could not ensure that the Great Light Temple would never make a mistake, it could reduce the error rate to the minimum. This time, it was the same to welcome Master Tam Yuan. After deducing that Master Tam Yuan was preparing to leave behind his inheritance, Su Jing immediately had an idea. The Great Light Temple did not care about Master Tam Yuan's inheritance, but the Great Light Temple cared about Master Tam Yuan's reputation. Master Tam Yuan had already laid the foundation in the East Sea. At this time, if someone from the Great Light Temple went to the East Sea as Master Tam Yuan's successor, then the pressure of preaching would undoubtedly be very low. Therefore, Su Ci immediately sent Ming Qi over to remind Zhongxian of this matter. Ming Qi was not very anxious at first. After all, in his opinion, even if Master Tam Yuan wanted to leave behind his inheritance, he would definitely leave it to Zhongxian. Among the Buddhist martial arts practitioners present to welcome Master Tam Yuan, the old monks of the Subodhi monastery were about the same age as Master Tam Yuan. As for the other Buddhist martial arts practitioners, how could they compare to Zhongxian? In the end, who would have thought that in the end, not only did Master Tam Yuan not give his inheritance to Zhongxian, but he gave it to Chu Xiu, who was not a Buddhist. Compared to the anxious Ming Qi, Zhongxian was still calm. He just said lightly, "Abbot did not tell me that I must obtain Master Tam Yuan's inheritance. Why can't I watch?" Chapter 471. Ming Qi was rendered speechless by Zhongxian's words. He did not know what to say. With Zhongxian's personality, not only in the outside world, but also in the Great Light Temple, Zhongxian could complete all the tasks given by the elders in the sect perfectly. However, as long as it was not part of the task, Zhongxian would not even look at it even if the sky fell. Ming Qi did not know what to say to such a person. In any case, Zhongxian's strength was obvious. No matter how eccentric Zhongxian's personality was, his strength alone was enough to make him the successor of the Great Light Temple. Buddhist techniques were not meant to be mastered quickly, and the Great Light Temple's techniques placed the most emphasis on the foundation. However, Zhongxian was able to reach the oneness of heaven and man realm before he was 30 years old, and his combat strength was close to the level of a martial Dao master. Such strength was extremely rare in the entire history of the Great Light Temple. At that moment, Fang Qishao also walked out of the small town outside the Dragon Beach with a pot of yellow wine in his hand. He looked like a sloppy person. Previously, he drank half a pot of yellow wine from Chu Xiu. Sword King City was located in the western region, and while the grape wine there was very famous, there was no yellow wine there. After tasting it, 7th young Master Fang was surprised to find that it tasted pretty good. He then filled a pot and prepared to leave. After all, he was already here. Now that he had shown up and made his presence known, his mission in Sword King City could be considered completed. At that moment, Fang Qishao also saw Zhongxian and Ming Qi on the side of the road. He could not help but raise his head and snort coldly. Then, he used the long sword in his hand to carry the wine pot and walked in another direction. Ming Qi suddenly felt a little comforted when he saw Fang Qishao like this. Compared to Fang Qishao, Zhongxian was considered more normal. At the very least, they did not have to worry about the sect's reputation being shamed. If the people of Sword King City knew that Fang Qishao behaved like this and did not have the aura of a young elite or the successor of Sword King City, they would probably go crazy with anger. However, Ming Qi didn't know that the people of Sword King City wouldn't go crazy because they were used to Fang Qishao's behavior. At this time, Ming Qi suddenly slapped his head. Now was not the time to think about these useless things. He hurriedly pulled Zhongxian and said, "Martial nephew Zhongxian, quickly go back. It might not be too late to stop Master Tam Yuan." The expression on Zhongxian's face did not change as he allowed Ming Qi to pull him towards the small town of Dragon Beach. For Zhongxian, these things didn't matter. Ming Qi came from the Karma Zen Hall, so his combat strength was inferior to him. However, because Ming Qi's seniority was higher than his, he was his martial uncle. Now that Ming Qi was preparing to organize Tan Yuan to pass on his cultivation to Chu Xiu, he would follow suit. Looking at the two figures, Fang Qishao's eyes showed a trace of doubt. He bit the mouth of the wine flask, took a big gulp, and followed behind them. Fang Qishao was just bored and wanted to watch the show. His Karma Sword Dao was about comprehension, not practice. Therefore, for Fang Qishao, a long period of closed-door cultivation didn't have much effect on improving his cultivation except for accumulating his internal force. Therefore, the 7th young Master Fang spent most of his time wandering outside instead of cultivating in seclusion within the sect. Now that his realm was the same as Zhongxian's, he was close to becoming a martial Dao Grandmaster, so he needed an epiphany. Therefore, he had been wandering around the Jianghu during this period. Now that he saw Zhongxian's actions, Fang Qishao's intuition told him that there must be a show to watch, so he immediately followed them. At this time, at the entrance of the small town's inn, Long Tianying and several Cetacean Society revered elders were guarding the entrance, protecting Master Tam Yuan. Although Long Tianying was a businessman, he also knew what kindness and morality were. If it weren't for Master Tam Yuan's help in the past, his cetacean society would have been annexed by the three evil islands. How could it still have its current glory? Moreover, Long Tianying was not a martial Dao grandmaster himself. It was very difficult for a Chamber of Commerce to recruit a martial Dao grandmaster level guest revered elder. It was precisely because of Master Tam Yuan's words that the cetacean society did not make things difficult for people in Donghai and could develop to its current scale. Now that Master Tam Yuan was about to pass away, Long Tianying also wanted to send Master Tam Yuan on his last journey to fulfill his last wish. At this time, the crowd outside to watch the show was suddenly separated, and Zhong Xian and Ming Qi hurried over. Everyone present was stunned. What was Zhong Xian planning to do when he returned? That monk in white was also from the Great Light Temple? Ming Qi walked in front of Long Tianying and said, "I'm Ming Qi from the Karma Meditation Hall of the Great Light Temple. I would like to see Master Tam Yuan. Please make way." Long Tianying frowned slightly and said, "Master Tam Yuan is currently imparting his skills. Please wait for a moment, Master Ming Qi." Ming Qi immediately said, "It's precisely because of this that I want to see Master Tam Yuan. Chu Xiu has a bad reputation in the pugilistic world. He has committed all sorts of evil deeds and has a huge grudge against the Buddhist sections. We must not impart our skills to such an evil thief. Let me in, I'll definitely persuade Master Tam Yuan to rescind his order." Long Tianying's eyes revealed a hint of disdain when he heard that. Although he was indebted to Master Tam Yuan, in reality, Long Tianying did not have a good impression of monks, especially Great Light Temple and Sabodhi Zen Monastery, the two leaders of the Buddhist sections. In the past, when the East Sea was filled with chaos and slaughter, why didn't you all come to save us? It was only now that Master Tam Yuan's name has spread throughout the pugilistic world that you all came to welcome him. Master Tam Yuan was Master Tam Yuan, and the other monks were other monks. Long Tianying was very clear on this point. Therefore, Long Tianying shook his head and said, "I'm sorry. Master Tam Yuan has ordered that no one is allowed to enter when he's imparting skills. Moreover, Chu Xiu was personally chosen by Master Tam Yuan as his successor. Be it Great Light Temple or Sabodhi Zen Monastery, they shouldn't have the right to interfere." Ming Qi's expression turned cold when he heard that. He snorted and said, "It's up to Master Tam Yuan whether he agrees or not. Get out of the way, I'll explain it to Master Tam Yuan personally." In front of Zhong Xian, Ming Qi's attitude was very amiable. He did not put on any airs of a senior or master at all. But in reality, Ming Qi was an elite disciple of the Karma Zen Hall, someone who would be heavily nurtured in the future. His status in the entire Great Light Temple was not low. Long Tianying was the leader of an overseas chamber of commerce. Normally, Ming Qi would not even be bothered with him. Why would he listen to his argument now? Seeing Ming Qi's attitude, Long Tianying shook his head and said, "I'm sorry, I won't let you in. Master Tam Yuan cannot be disturbed when he's imparting skills. As long as I'm here, no one can step into this inn. You're so stubborn." Ming Qi snorted and slammed his palm at Long Tianying. In an instant, a seven-colored Buddha's light bloomed and was extremely dazzling. However, Long Tianying was not afraid at all. The Gang Qi around his body condensed into one. Like a tsunami, he punched out with a loud bang. The wind broke through the waves, and its power was boundless. As the leader of the Cetacean Society, it was impossible for Long Tianying to only be in the realm and not have any combat power. It should be known that he had built the Cetacean Society from scratch. In the beginning, he had fought with many people, so Long Tianying's combat power was not bad. He was actually evenly matched with Ming Qi. Of course, this did not mean that Long Tianying's strength was strong enough to compete with the martial artists of the Great Light Temple, but Ming Qi was a special case. He came from the Karma Zen Hall and majored in the Karma Zen Hall's secret, future incarnation scripture. This technique was mainly about karma deduction and cultivating the state of mind. Although it was also helpful for one's own combat power, to exert its true power, one must wait until the realm of the martial Dao Grand Master. The current Ming Qi was too far behind, so he was tied with Long Tianying. If it were the monks of the Vajra Hall or the Dharma Hall, it was estimated that it would be very easy to deal with Long Tianying. Seeing that he could not take down Long Tianying, and Zhong Xian next to him was like a statue, Ming Qi was so depressed that he wanted to vomit blood. This Zhong Xian had no foresight at all. Seeing that he could not take down Long Tianying, would he not make a move? Did he have to shout it out and make it so embarrassing? In fact, Zhong Xian was really ready to make a move, but not now. It was when Ming Qi was in danger. In Zhong Xian's way of thinking, Ming Qi was his martial uncle. If he was beaten to the point of vomiting blood and being injured, he should make a move. However, he was still fighting with others and it was very lively. If no one spoke in this situation, Zhong Xian would not be a busybody. However, at the moment, Ming Qi really had no way to deal with Long Tianying. He could only shout, "Zhong Xian! Come and help me!" As soon as these words were spoken, Ming Qi heard the discussions of the surrounding martial artists. They were all saying that he was useless. As a master's uncle, he actually had to ask for a disciple's nephew's help. Furthermore, a martial artist from the Great Light Temple actually had to fight 1 against 2. It was really too degrading. However, at the moment, Ming Qi just wanted to stop Master Tam Yuan from passing on his skills. He could not care so much. At this time, Zhong Xian had already made a move. Taking a step out, in an instant, Long Tianying felt dark clouds covering his head as if a storm was coming. A thick pressure had completely surrounded him. This change immediately made Long Tianying's expression change. Was the existence of the second on the Longhu leaderboard really so terrifying? This kind of aura was already comparable to a martial Dao Grandmaster. In fact, even in some martial Dao Grandmasters, Long Tianying had not felt such a terrifying aura like Zhong Xian's. A Wisdom King seal fell. It was a simple Wisdom King seal, but it suppressed everything. It was as if everything in this world would be completely torn apart and crushed into nothingness under this Wisdom King seal. Long Tianying shouted angrily and took a deep breath. In an instant, an endless amount of heaven and earth Yuan Qi was swallowed into his stomach. Then, it merged with his own earth energy and suddenly exploded, forming a huge vortex-like cyclone that blasted towards Zhong Xian. World engulfing. However, this move of Long Tianying could not even block Zhong Xian for a breath's time. In an instant, the cyclone shattered and the earth energy was extinguished. Long Tianying was directly blown away by this seal and vomited blood. Chapter 472. They were both at the oneness of heaven and man realm, but Ming Qi and Long Tianying were evenly matched. Now that it was Zhong Xian's turn, Ming Qi could not even withstand one move, which showed how big the gap was. Long Tianying was also shocked. This was the first time he fought with a young talent on the Longhu list. Putting others aside, this Zhong Xian was definitely a monster, even more terrifying than some martial arts masters. Go! Block the door, don't let anyone in to disturb Master Tam Yuan. Long Tianying shouted at the other Cetacean Society guest chamberlains. Those martial artists at the oneness of heaven and man realm did not hesitate. Even in the face of Zhong Xian, an expert who was famous in the underworld and even seriously injured Long Tianying in one move, they did not hesitate to rush forward. It had to be said that the quality of these guest chamberlains recruited by Long Tianying was quite high. These people were all well-known martial artists in the East Sea. After they were recruited into the Cetacean Society, Long Tianying treated them like brothers and generously recruited them. So now at this critical moment, these guest chamberlains were willing to fight with their lives for Long Tianying. Zhong Xian was expressionless, but his hands did not stop at all. All kinds of bright king seals fell, and none of the martial artists at the oneness of heaven and man realm present could withstand one move from him. All of them were seriously injured and vomited blood by his seal. And as the fight went on, everyone could see that Zhong Xian did not want to kill people. He still held back. Otherwise, some of the weaker martial artists in the Cetacean Society were likely to be directly killed by his bright king seal. At this time, in the room, Master Tam Yuan had completely passed on all his power and cultivation method to Chu Xiu. After the inheritance, although Master Tam Yuan did not die, and his appearance did not change much, Chu Xiu sensed an aura from him, an aura of decay. Master Tam Yuan was almost at the end of his rope. Chu Xiu stood up and bowed to Master Tam Yuan. "Thank you, Master." This Xie Chu Xiu was from the bottom of his heart. After all, although he had obtained his strength and inheritance through deception, it could be said that Master Tam Yuan had willingly given it to him. Master Tam Yuan reluctantly waved his hand and said, "My last wish has been fulfilled. My purpose in returning to the Central Plains has been fulfilled. My mind is clear, and I no longer have any thoughts. I should be the one thanking you, Chu." Chu Xiu remained silent. Sometimes, it was better for people to be muddle-headed. If they saw everything too clearly, they would have many regrets. At this time, Chu Xiu looked outside the inn and said, "Master, how should we deal with the people from the Great Light Temple?" When they were imparting their cultivation methods, Chu Xiu and Master Tam Yuan had already noticed the commotion below. However, they were at a crucial moment and could not be disturbed. Therefore, they did not show up. Master Tam Yuan sighed when he heard that. "Back when I didn't go to the East Sea, there were only 2 sacred grounds of the Buddhist sects for all the Buddhist disciples in the world. One was the Great Light Temple of the Northern Buddhist sect, and the other was the Subodhi Monastery of the Southern Buddhist sect. Because of the cultivation method I cultivate, I've always treated the Great Light Temple as the sacred ground in my heart. I've always dreamed of going to the Great Light Temple. However, as time passed, this desire became weaker and weaker. In the end, I no longer had any interest in going to the Great Light Temple. Under the bright Buddhist light, there is no room for any darkness. I don't know when it started, but the Great Light Temple has changed. They've become extreme and arrogant. They only care about strengthening their Buddhist light so that the light can suppress more darkness. However, they've never thought about how to completely find the source of the darkness instead of blindly suppressing it." Seeing the sacred ground of the Buddhist sects in the past, the place of his dreams, turn into such a state that was filled with interests and schemes, Master Tam Yuan could not help but sigh in his heart. Chu Xiu was not as emotional as Master Tam Yuan. He merely said calmly, "Master, there's one thing you're wrong about. If there's no darkness, how can there be light? Everything needs to be compared. Perhaps the Great Light Temple itself does not want this darkness to be completely destroyed." Master Tam Yuan was stunned. What Chu Xiu said made some sense, but it was a little too extreme. Although Master Tam Yuan felt that the Great Light Temple's actions were a little too realistic, the other party should not be that dark. Sighing again, Master Tam Yuan said, "Chu, go and settle the rest. I can't fight anymore, and I can't stop them." Chu Xiu nodded and walked straight out the door. Meanwhile, below, the Cetacean Society guests that Long Tianying had brought with him did not last long. They were already heavily injured and defeated by Zhong Xian. Almost all of them had lost their ability to fight. Seeing that Zhong Xian and Ming Qi were about to step into the inn, Long Tianying forced himself to stand up and stood in front of the 2 of them. This time, even the onlookers were a little surprised. This Long Tianying was really something. At this time, he still dared to stand in front of Zhong Xian and Ming Qi. Was this person really not afraid of death? Zhong Xian said calmly, "Move aside." Long Tianying clenched his teeth and shook his head. "The Great Light Temple is so overbearing. Aren't you afraid of attracting criticism?" Ming Qi frowned and snorted. "Overbearing? Since the Great Light Temple is the leader of the Buddhist sects, we can't just watch as our Buddhist martial arts fall into the hands of outsiders. Don't forget, you're just an outsider. Since you don't know how to appreciate kindness, then don't blame me for being ruthless. As soon as he finished speaking, Ming Qi immediately prepared to make a move and finish off Long Tianying completely. The Great Light Temple had never been afraid of outsiders calling them overbearing. This was because the way the Great Light Temple did things was already very overbearing. They did not care what others said. However, just as he was about to make a move, a flash of a knife roared out from inside the inn. As the flash of the knife approached, boundless demonic energy mixed with the power of blood suddenly descended. The powerful demonic energy from the knife swept across dozens of feet and even enveloped the entire long street. The knife slashed down and a murderous intent rose. As the knife slashed down, Ming Qi could even faintly hear the cries of evil spirits. It was abnormally horrifying. With such terrifying demonic energy, if Ming Qi did not know who was inside, he would even suspect that there was a peerless demon living inside. Raising both palms, an endless Buddhist light bloomed. However, under the demonic knife, the Buddhist light was easily extinguished, just like how Zhong Xian had crushed Long Tianying with ease. Just as Ming Qi was about to be killed by the knife, Zhong Xian also moved. The sound of Buddhist chanting came from all around him. His body, which seemed to be cast from steel, now bloomed with an even more dazzling golden Buddhist light. A seal blasted out. Vajra subduing demons, shattering mountains and rivers. Guardian Deity Seal. With a loud bang, Zhong Xian directly stood in front of Ming Qi and used the Guardian Deity Seal to block Chu Xiu's knife. As the powerful Gang Qi dispersed, a deep white mark was left on Zhong Xian's palm. However, strangely, there was no blood flowing out. Chu Xiu walked out of the inn with his knife in hand. His black robes fluttered in the wind that had yet to dissipate. At this moment, the aura around his body was in harmony with the heavens and the earth, looking extremely mysterious. Everyone could also see that Chu Xiu had already stepped into the unity of heaven and man realm. Previously, when the martial arts practitioners in the underworld talked about the Longhu leaderboard, they would discuss the top 5 and the top 10 and so on. After all, to most people, only the top 5 of the Longhu leaderboard could be said to be on the same level. This was because those who could be ranked in the top 5 were all existences in the unity of heaven and man realm. Now that Chu Xiu had stepped into the unity of heaven and man realm, they would probably not be discussing the top 5, but the top 6. Looking at Ming Qi and Zhong Xian, Chu Xiu laughed coldly and said, "In terms of strength, Master Tam Yuan has already passed it on to me. I have also learned the techniques." Why? Now that the Great Light Temple has an opinion, do you still want to go back? What a joke. Master Tam Yuan is Master Tam Yuan, and the Great Light Temple is the Great Light Temple. What right do you have to interfere with Master Tam Yuan's decision? Isn't the Great Light Temple being a little too involved? Do you really think that you are the leader of the Buddhist sects in the world, and that all the martial arts practitioners in the Buddhist sects have to listen to the Great Light Temple? As these words were said, many of the Buddhist martial arts practitioners present felt a little unnatural. The Buddhist sects in the world respected the Great Light Temple and Sabodhi Zen Monastery. Everyone knew this, and they had always done so. However, being respected was being respected. What the Great Light Temple did today was indeed a little overbearing. Although they did not approve of Master Tam Yuan passing down the techniques to Chu Xiu, Master Tam Yuan was a holy monk recognized by the entire underworld. His status was not lower than the Great Light Temple's. Even if Master Tam Yuan was planning to pass down the techniques to Chu Xiu, even if he was planning to pass down the techniques to the remnants of the demonic cult, the others would not be able to say anything. Now that the Great Light Temple had such an attitude towards Master Tam Yuan, what would they do if something happened in the future? This made everyone present feel a little uncomfortable. Ming Qi frowned. He suddenly realized that he did not have the slightest advantage when it came to arguing with Chu Xiu. This guy's ability to invert right and wrong and pester people endlessly was not inferior to his strength. Ming Qi was targeting him, but now that Chu Xiu had said this, it became the Great Light Temple that was extremely overbearing and targeting Master Tam Yuan. Therefore, Ming Qi rationally did not want to waste any more time with Chu Xiu. He said coldly to Zhongxian, do it. This Chu Xiu used some unknown method to deceive Master Tam Yuan and obtain the inheritance. Our Great Light Temple cannot sit back and watch Master Tam Yuan's inheritance fall into the hands of such a despicable person. Even if you have the inheritance, you must hand it over now. Ming Qi knew about the grudge between Chu Xiu and the Great Light Temple in the past. In the end, it was Su Yun, the master of Karma Zen Hall, who spoke up to settle it. However, Ming Qi did not care about Su Yun's words. Although the Karma Zen Hall's strength was not as strong as Karma Zen Hall, its status was more important than Karma Zen Hall. Karma Zen Hall's strength was only because of its master, Su Yun, while the Karma Zen Hall's importance to the Great Light Temple was because of the Karma Zen Hall itself. Chapter 473. Chu Xiu squinted his eyes and looked at Zhongxian. He did not expect that he would have to fight with Zhongxian again so soon. In fact, although Ming Qi from the Great Light Temple was overbearing, what he said was true. Chu Xiu's power inheritance was obtained through deception. However, with Chu Xiu's character, how could he spit out the things that entered his mouth? He did not have such a habit. Therefore, this battle was inevitable and Chu Xiu was willing to accompany him. Chu Xiu had just stepped into the unity of heaven and man realm. Normally, he would need to retreat for a period of time to familiarize himself with his realm. However, for the current Chu Xiu, it was much faster to familiarize himself with his realm when fighting with someone than when he was in seclusion. Especially when his opponent was Zhongxian, the same Zhongxian who had previously given Chu Xiu a lot of pressure. On the other side, Zhongxian paused after hearing Ming Qi's words. However, he also stood up. In fact, Zhongxian did not want to fight because it was meaningless. Zhongxian's character was more stubborn, but he was not an idiot. He could think. In front of so many people, Master Tam Yuan had already passed on his power and cultivation technique to Chu Xiu. Even if they forced Chu Xiu to hand over the cultivation technique, what was the use? What the Great Light Temple really wanted was not the cultivation technique, but Master Tam Yuan's reputation. Therefore, if they were to make a move now, they would only be able to earn some useless reputation. In fact, there was not much meaning to it. However, Ming Qi was his master uncle and Zhongxian's elder. Since he had spoken, Zhongxian would not refuse as long as it did not affect the overall situation. With a step forward, the Buddha light around Zhongxian had condensed to the extreme, making him look like a god or a demon. The Wisdom King seal fell, but this time it was not an ordinary Wisdom King seal. It was the Wrath Wisdom King seal. The Buddha flame rose and suppressed everything. Chu Xiu, who had stepped into the oneness of heaven and man realm, was completely different from the previous Chu Xiu. Even if they had not officially fought, Zhongxian could feel the gap between them. Therefore, he used all his strength in this attack. The demonic aura in Chu Xiu's eyes rose, and he also took a step forward. In an instant, demonic flames soared into the sky. Taking another step forward, the blood-refined god aura soared into the sky, transforming into a blood-colored blade that coiled around the blade. Taking the third step, Chu Xiu's body was completely enveloped in a killing intent. Entering the selfless killing state, there was nothing in the world that he could not kill. Chu Xiu continuously unleashed his strongest state, stirring the winds and clouds around him. Strands of power passively seeped into Chu Xiu's body. This was a completely different realm. Taishan Wang Qing. This heaven and earth did not have any attributes to begin with. Devils could survive in this heaven and earth, and Buddhas could also shine under the sun. Therefore, how much power of heaven and earth Chu Xiu could draw over depended entirely on how high his compatibility with this heaven and earth was. He was a devil, and this heaven and earth was a devil. As the blade slashed down, boundless evil ghosts wailed, as if the gates of hell had opened, making people feel extremely creepy and evil. At this time, the blade intent of the Avicii three blades had already seeped into Chu Xiu's bones. The incomparably evil blade collided with Zhong Xian's angry Akalanatha seal, and in an instant, a strong wave broke out. The demonic aura and Buddha's flame splashed everywhere, and a series of violent explosions came one after another. The powerful force made everyone's expression change. They had just exchanged blows, but the surrounding ground had already begun to crack, and the entire long street had become a mess. If these two people continued to fight, perhaps a small town would be destroyed by these two people. Amidst the boundless demonic flames, Zhong Xian's body was shrouded in Buddha's light. Facing the slash of Chu Xiu's blade aura, he slashed down one after another with the Akalanatha seal, directly and violently colliding with Chu Xiu's blade aura. Chu Xiu's hands did not stop. Under the selfless killing realm, all the gang qi in his body condensed on the blade. The demonic blade slashed wildly, and in an instant, he had already slashed out hundreds of times. The sky was filled with demonic aura and blade aura, and it almost covered the sun. The fight between these two people was simple and violent to the extreme. They were completely relying on their own strength to fight head-on. It was just that one was unintentional, while the other was intentional. Zhong Xian's fighting style had always been like this, crushing all along the way and extremely powerful. And Chu Xiu was not only good at brute force. At this time, he was only doing this to hone his own realm strength. However, in the collision between the Akalanatha seal and the demonic blade, everyone also discovered that Zhong Xian still had the upper hand. Chu Xiu's figure did not retreat, but Zhong Xian faced Chu Xiu's blade aura head-on and moved forward. The powerful demonic blade was either shattered by his Akalanatha seal, or he used his body to resist some of the aftershocks, and he did not suffer the slightest injury. Zhong Xian was not only terrifyingly strong, but even his physical body was so strong that it was almost abnormal. It was no wonder that Fang Qishao called Zhong Xian a freak. If Chu Xiu's powerful demonic aura blade aura had slashed on other martial artists in the unity of heaven and man realm, that person would probably have been immediately sent flying with blood spurting out of his mouth. The weaker ones might even have been killed directly. But what if it had slashed on Zhong Xian? It only left a white mark, and the damage caused to Zhong Xian could be said to be negligible. Seeing this scene, Fang Qishao, who was watching the battle from the crowd, could not help but look serious. Zhong Xian's cultivation level was even stronger than before. The first time Chu Xiu fought with Zhong Xian had not used his full strength. It was only now that Zhong Xian had revealed his full cultivation level. Zhong Xian's reputation in the underworld was based on his Akalanatha seal, which was ever-changing and immeasurably powerful. However, in reality, the Akalanatha seal was not considered a top-notch peerless technique in the Great Light Temple. It could only be considered not bad. However, Fang Qishao knew that the physique tempering technique that Zhong Xian cultivated was one of the strongest among the many physique tempering techniques in the Great Light Temple. It was a peerless technique that surpassed the 9 transformations, the Moonlight King's glazed golden body. Although this technique was a secret peerless technique of the Great Light Temple, it was not very famous in the underworld because very few people could successfully cultivate it. The Moonlight King's glazed golden body was a glazed Light King Buddha form that refined one's body like a weapon. The glazed Light King would evolve the indestructible glazed Pure Land in one's body. When cultivated to the end, one's body would not be indestructible, but it would be like Vajra glazed, impervious to all spells and repelling all evil. Furthermore, the Moonlight King's azure glass golden body had a miraculous healing effect. Even if one were to suffer a serious injury during a battle, with the power of the alchemist Azure Glass Light Buddha Lord, he would be able to recover at the fastest speed possible. Therefore, those who fought with Zhongxian, even if they had the upper hand in the early stages, would definitely be a nightmare in the later stages. However, although this technique was powerful, it had extremely high requirements for the cultivator's aptitude and willpower. It could even be said that it was indispensable. Those with aptitude could not withstand the pain of refining one's body like refining a weapon, and those who could withstand such pain did not have the aptitude. Therefore, in the past 1,000 years, Zhongxian was the only one who could successfully cultivate the Moonlight King's glazed golden body. When Zhongxian faced Chu Xiu, he had already unleashed his physical cultivation to the extreme. He pushed all the way to Chu Xiu, and another Wisdom King seal landed. Its power was unparalleled. The mighty Wisdom King seal. When the seal landed, it was like a five-fingered mountain crashing down. The pressure it brought to Chu Xiu made it hard for him to breathe. At that moment, Chu Xiu retracted his sword and formed a seal. The sun, moon, and stars rotated in his eyes. He had unleashed the heaven's sun gazing at air to its extreme, but it was still useless. Was Zhongxian's mighty Wisdom King seal really flawless? Otherwise, under Chu Xiu's heaven's sun gazing at air, he could see several loopholes, but it was still useless. Even if Chu Xiu attacked these loopholes, in the face of absolute power, he would still be unable to defeat Zhongxian's Wisdom King seal. And if he wanted to escape, Zhongxian's aura had already sealed off all escape routes for Chu Xiu. As long as Chu Xiu retreated and escaped, Zhongxian's attack would definitely pour down. Therefore, Chu Xiu could only face it head-on. The Wisdom Fist seal exploded. Earth energy condensed and covered the sky. But under Zhongxian's mighty Wisdom King seal, the Wisdom Fist seal was directly shattered. Instead of retreating, Chu Xiu advanced. The perfect Aquarius seal, the Great Vajrawill seal, and the Sun-Will seal came crashing down. 3 seals were unleashed consecutively, and the power of the 3 seals stacked together to collide with Zhongxian's mighty Wisdom King seal. With a loud explosion, a pit of over 30 meters was blasted under the feet of the 2 of them. Even the soil was turned into dust by the powerful earth energy storm. A huge force attacked, and Chu Xiu could not help but feel a sharp pain in his arm. The web between his thumb and forefinger split open, and blood spilled out. In terms of power, even if Chu Xiu had stepped into the unity of heaven and man realm, he was still inferior to Zhongxian. The effect of the Great Vajra divine powers in body-tempering techniques was not bad, but it was just not bad. On the other hand, the Lunar Treasure Light King Azure Golden Body that Zhongxian cultivated was a peerless technique that surpassed the 9 transformations. Even in the Great Light Temple, it was a top-notch existence. The difference between the 2 was not small. Just as Zhongxian's eyes were full of Buddha's light and he was about to attack again, Chu Xiu's eyes suddenly turned into a dark abyss. It was boundless, and it swallowed Zhongxian's Buddha's light, instantly pulling him into it. In an instant, countless ferocious evil spirits bit and pulled at Zhongxian from under his feet, as if they wanted to pull him into the abyss of the netherworld. Beside Zhongxian, there were countless pink mists surrounding him, and there were Azura goddesses dancing. They were naked, and their expressions were enchanting and extremely seductive. In the sky, there were countless gods and Buddhas that appeared, glaring at Zhongxian angrily. They scolded him for deceiving his master, destroying his ancestors, and not respecting the precepts. These illusions were like a dream, and it was impossible to tell what was real and what was fake. This move was a spiritual illusion created by Chu Xiu's combination of the great art of mental demons rotation and the great art of extinguishing earth extinguishing and soul shifting. The great art of mental demons rotation used mental energy to attack the opponent's heart and break their state of mind, which was evil and strange. On the other hand, the great art of extinguishing earth extinguishing and soul shifting used mental energy to forcefully invade the opponent's mind, which was overbearing and ruthless. At this moment, Chu Xiu combined the two together. While it affected Zhong Xian's state of mind, it was also eroding his mental energy. Chapter 474. Among the techniques that Chu Xiu possessed, the Great Inner Demon Rotation Technique and the 9 Forms of Soul Catcher were the ones that Chu Xiu was unwilling to reveal in front of outsiders. After all, these two techniques were authentic Kunlun devil cult martial arts. Although very few people knew about them, Chu Xiu could not guarantee that no one would be able to recognize them. Right now, Chu Xiu's identity and his identity as a member of the Kunlun demon sect were both in the light and in the dark. Chu Xiu didn't wish to reveal his identity so early on. Therefore, Chu Xiu rarely used these two techniques. Even if he did, he would only choose a martial art that did not have obvious external characteristics. Just like the silk soul net that Chu Xiu had used when he schemed against Iron Sword sects Xingqiangyong, its external characteristics were not obvious. This Great Inner Demon Rotation Technique, which was directly combined with the Great Soul Shifting Technique of extinguishing heaven and extinguishing earth, was the same. Other than Zhong Xian himself, outsiders would not be able to see any special characteristics. At that moment, in the boundless illusion, the Buddhist light in Zhong Xian's eyes dimmed. He really did not expect this move from Chu Xiu. All along, when Chu Xiu fought with him, the martial arts that he had displayed leaned towards the fierce and overbearing type. Who would have thought that Chu Xiu would actually use such an evil primordial spirit secret technique? Given Zhong Xian's character, he would not even bother to understand information about Chu Xiu. It should be said that Zhong Xian would not understand any opponent's information. Moreover, even if he knew that Chu Xiu was proficient in primordial spirit secret techniques, so what? In any case, for Zhong Xian, no matter what he faced, there was only one way to deal with it, and that was to directly crush it. Zhong Xian's hands formed a strange hand seal. Compared to the fierce and imposing Wisdom King seal, this hand seal actually gave off an extremely gentle feeling. In an instant, the Buddhist light in Zhong Xian's eyes shone brightly again. Behind him, an illusion of the medicine-glazed light Buddha Lord appeared, sitting on a lotus platform with a solemn expression. Break! Zhong Xian calmly spat out a single word. In an instant, a boundless power of blood and qi shot up into the sky. The reason why essence spirit mystic techniques were strange was that there were very few ways to deal with essence spirit mystic techniques. Either you were proficient in essence soul mystic arts to begin with, then you could withstand the collision head-on. Otherwise, he would completely rely on his own powerful vital energy and blood to deal with the impact of the essence soul mystic technique. Those with strong qi and blood would have stable and resolute psyche power. Naturally, they would have a strong resistance to psyche power impacts. This was also the reason why some of the evil creatures in the forest would often find some thin and weak ordinary people, and not some martial arts experts. However, using such a method to deal with essence soul mystic arts could only be described in one word: forcefully resisting. He could only passively defend, unable to counterattack. But now, Zhong Xian was telling everyone that when one's vital qi and blood reached a certain level, it could also counteract one's spiritual power. Just like what was happening right now. As the power of blood and blood burst forth, those evil ghosts were all smashed into smithereens. The Shura goddess wailed in anguish and dissipated. Even the gods and Buddhas that filled the skies let out cries of indignation before finally disappearing. Taking another step forward, the darkness before him was torn apart. Zhong Xian didn't even bother to take a look as he sent out yet another bright ruler seal. Zhong Xian's prediction was right. The moment Chu Xiu pulled Zhong Xian into that illusion, he had already decided to strike. Chu Xiu didn't choose to use his full strength to activate that illusion. This was because he knew that against an existence of Zhong Xian's level, even if he used his full strength, it would be useless. He might as well use it to delay the other party for a period of time. In reality, that was indeed the case. That illusion didn't even delay Zhong Xian for a breath's time before it was broken by him. But to Chu Xiu, this was enough. At this instant, Buddha's light shone brightly around Chu Xiu, and a Vairocana Dharma form appeared behind him. As Chu Xiu formed hand seals, his figure and the Vairocana Dharma form became more and more compatible. Chu Xiu placed his right hand in front of his chest, forming the fearless seal. His Dharma form was solemn. In an instant, endless light bloomed. The blood in Chu Xiu's body seemed to be boiling, burning with a scorching Buddha's flame. It turned into the power of Vairocana Dharma form and released countless Buddha's light that shrouded Zhong Xian. Sun-changing technique. Seizing the fortune of heaven and earth, stealing the sky and changing the sun. Its power was limitless. Moreover, this sun-changing technique wasn't the original version of the sun-changing technique. Instead, it was the sun-changing technique that Master Tam Yuan had developed after comprehending and evolving it. Now that he had been imparted by Master Tam Yuan, Chu Xiu could use 80% of the power of the sun-changing technique. Therefore, while its power was strong, Chu Xiu almost couldn't control this powerful technique. Bathed in the endless Buddha's light, Zhong Xian's wisdom king seal shattered for the first time. This was the first time it was shattered by Chu Xiu head-on. Raising his head to look at the Vairocana Dharma form that was shining with resplendent Buddha's flame, Zhong Xian chose to be on the defensive for the first time. The Buddha's light around him dissipated, and in its place, a cold moonlight appeared. The alchemist Vairocana light Buddha's Dharma form appeared behind him. It was much clearer than the Vairocana Dharma form behind Chu Xiu. Amidst the flawless moonlight, the alchemist Vairocana light Buddha's Dharma form formed a dhyana seal. A strange power was emitted. It wasn't earth chi, but it wasn't heaven and earth energy either. However, this power circled around Zhong Xian's body, causing the Vairocana light Buddha's sun-changing technique to shine even brighter. It was actually going against Chu Xiu's sun-changing technique. One was the sun, and the other was the moonlight. However, neither of them gave way. At the side, Ming Qi's eyes flashed with anxiety when he saw this. He had never imagined that Chu Xiu would actually become so powerful after obtaining Master Tan Yuan's inheritance. He was actually able to fight with Zhong Xian to such an extent. This caused Ming Qi to be unable to help but become anxious. Zhong Xian couldn't lose. To the Great Light Temple, Zhong Xian was the face of the Great Light Temple. There were many young talents in the world who respected Taoism and Buddhism. Other than Zhang Chengzhen of the Celestial Master's abode, Zhong Xian couldn't lose to anyone, let alone Chu Xiu, who was several ranks lower than Zhong Xian. This time, the Great Light Temple only wanted to obtain Master Tam Yuan's legacy and make a fuss in the East Sea. However, the one who made Zhong Xian attack Chu Xiu was Ming Qi. If anything happened to Zhong Xian this time, he would be the one to be severely punished when he returned to the Great Light Temple. Ming Qi gritted his teeth. A weak Buddha's light bloomed in his hands. His 10 fingers formed various hand seals and he quickly deduced. This was the Great Light Temple's triple reincarnation's future scripture. It was said that when cultivated to its peak, one could even deduce the future of 3 lifetimes. In theory, it was similar to Chu Xiu's heaven's sun gazing at air. However, Chu Xiu's sun gazing at air was a secret scripture of Taoism. Its main use was still in combat. It could only see what was in front of one's eyes and could not see other futures. It could not be used for divination, but at the same time, the speed of the sun gazing at air far exceeded that of the triple reincarnation's future scripture. There was no need for such complicated hand seals to deduce. At this time, Ming Qi was using all his strength to deduce the flaws on Chu Xiu's side. He was prepared to intervene later. Zhong Xian's expression had always been like that of a statue. Ming Qi couldn't tell if he had the upper hand or if he wasn't. So, for safety's sake, even if others said that Ming Qi's sneak attack was shameless, he still had to intervene. But at this moment, a beam of sword chi blasted behind him, giving Ming Qi a huge fright. It also interrupted Ming Qi's deduction. Ming Qi looked behind him and saw Fang Qishao, who was holding a wine pot and looking like he was watching the show. He could not help but say angrily, "Fang Qishao. What is the meaning of this?" Fang Qishao spread his hands and said, "It's fair. They're fighting so well, so why do you have to intervene? If you have the time, why don't you deduce if you will be punished when you return to the Great Light Temple? That way, you can be prepared." Ming Qi was so angry that his eyebrows twitched. He shouted in a low voice, "Fang Qishao. The Great Light Temple has no enmity with you, and Chu Xiu also has enmity with your Sword King city. Are you crazy? Why are you helping Chu Xiu?" Fang Qishao shook his head with a serious expression and said, "I'm not helping Chu Xiu. I'm just watching the show. You can't interrupt such a wonderful show. This is a warning. Next time, I'd like to see if your triple lifetimes future sutra is faster or if my karma sword path is faster." It was rare for Fang Qishao to be serious. Although he seemed to be looking for an excuse, he was actually telling the truth. He was really watching the show. As the third person on the Longhu list, Fang Qishao had fought with Zhong Xian before. However, he had been at a disadvantage. Perhaps it was because he wanted to save face, or perhaps it was because he was not confident. Fang Qishao almost never fought with Zhong Xian again after he was at a disadvantage. However, Zhong Xian had used his full strength when he fought with Chu Xiu this time. Watching their fight would be beneficial to Fang Qishao, who was in the same realm as them. Therefore, he could not let Ming Qi ruin everything. When Ming Qi saw Fang Qishao's expression, he was so angry that his face turned red. However, he did not dare to make another move. Ming Qi knew how terrifying Zhong Xian was, and it was needless to say how terrifying Fang Qishao, who was only one rank lower than Zhong Xian, was. While Chu Xiu and Zhong Xian were still in a stalemate, a sigh was heard from the inn. "Sigh, let's stop. Everyone from the Great Light Temple, I was the one who chose my successor. I'm already so old. Don't tell me I don't even have the right to choose my own successor." Master Tam Yuan walked out of the inn slowly with a helpless look on his face. He had thought that since Chu Xiu had appeared, it meant that the inheritance had been completed, and the people from the Great Light Temple would retreat. However, he did not expect them to still want to make a move. It had been a long time since he stepped into the Central Plains, and the Great Light Temple had become completely different from what he remembered. Perhaps Master Tam Yuan had never really understood what the Great Light Temple was, because at that time, he did not have the right to come into contact with the real Great Light Temple with his abilities and status. Chapter 475. As Master Tam Yuan spoke up, Chu Xiu and Zhong Xian could no longer continue fighting. After all, Master Tam Yuan was about to die. If the Great Light Temple were to force him to take back the technique that he had passed to Chu Xiu, it would be too much. Hence, Ming Qi could only pinch his nose and say, "Zhong Xian, stop fighting. Stop." However, this time, Zhong Xian did not listen to Ming Qi's order to stop immediately. Instead, his eyes shone brightly, and he only stopped after a while. Fang Qishao, who was at the back, stroked his chin. After Chu Xiu entered the unity of heaven and man realm, his combat power was not weak at all. He could actually force Zhong Xian into a serious state. However, it was obvious that Chu Xiu had lost this round. After Zhong Xian retracted his hand, the radiance of the sun around Chu Xiu also dissipated. However, his face had already turned pale. The power of the sun-changing technique was not something that Chu Xiu could use as he wished. If he did not control the power of the sun-changing technique well, he would only end up hurting himself and others. Meanwhile, on Zhong Xian's side, he had only just started to get serious. If Master Tam Yuan did not show up, the person who would lose in the end would still be Chu Xiu. Ming Qi's expression was a little ugly as he cupped his hands at Master Tam Yuan and said, "Master Tam Yuan, you're the publicly recognized holy monk of the Buddhist sect. We naturally can't control who you want to pass the technique to. However, this Chu Xiu has a ferocious reputation. If he were to use the cultivation technique you taught him to do something evil in the future, then the karma will be placed on you, and it will ruin your reputation in the future. I'm doing this for your own good." Master Tan Yuan smiled and said, "This old monk appreciates the kindness of the Temple of Great Light, but let's talk about the future in the future. Karma is such a complicated thing, so how can you and I see through it now? As for my reputation, the so-called title of holy monk is also something that was forcefully added because of everyone's love for me. It doesn't matter if it's ruined. At that time, I'm afraid this old monk will already be a pile of bones. Would I still need to care about my reputation?" Hearing Master Tam Yuan's words, Ming Qi could only put on a gloomy expression as he reluctantly cupped his hands to bid farewell and turned to leave. Seeing Ming Qi's attitude, Chu Xiu couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. The Temple of Great Light was really used to being domineering. They actually sent such a person over. They were simply asking for trouble. Although Master Tan Yuan was alone, he still had the reputation of a holy monk. Not only was he recognized by Buddhism, but he was also a holy monk recognized by the entire martial arts world. The Temple of Great Light could be domineering to others, but to be so domineering to a person like Master Tam Yuan, who was about to die, was basically ruining their own reputation. This Ming Qi came from the Temple of Great Light's Karma Hall. Forget about the martial arts world, even in the Temple of Great Light, the Karma Hall's status was very high. It could even be said that in the Temple of Great Light, although the Karma Hall's combat power was not the strongest, their status was extraordinary. If the Temple of Great Light had only sent Ming Qi, it would have been fine. But in the end, they sent Zhong Xian, who was stubborn and did not know how to be flexible. In the end, it was not surprising that things had escalated to such a state. After Zhong Xian and Ming Qi left, Master Tam Yuan walked towards Long Tianying and the others. He sighed and said, "President Long, I've implicated you." Long Tianying hurriedly shook his head and said, "Don't say that, Master. It's just a small matter. Not to mention that we only suffered some minor injuries. Even if we had to risk our lives to stop the people from the Temple of Great Light, it would be worth it." Master Tam Yuan shook his head and said, "I'm already at the end of my rope, but President Long, you're still young. Don't talk about dying. Now that my wish has been fulfilled, I'm ready to return to my hometown. President Long, please go back." Long Tianying hurriedly shook his head and said, "I won't forget the kindness you've shown me in the past. The development of the Cetacean Society is already on the right track. It's fine for me to be away for a while. I hope Master can let me send you on your last journey." Hearing Long Tianying say that, Master Tam Yuan did not stop him. He only turned around to look at Chu Xiu and said, "Chu, I haven't been to the Central Plains for a long time. Can I trouble you to send me back to my hometown?" Chu Xiu nodded and said, "It's my duty." Although he had obtained the cultivation method by deceiving Master Tam Yuan, Chu Xiu naturally would not refuse such a request. Just as Master Tam Yuan was about to leave, he suddenly saw Fang Qi Shao, who was also about to leave with a flagon of wine. Master Tam Yuan suddenly asked, "Young friend, please wait a moment. May I ask if you're from Sword King City?" Fang Qi Shao said somewhat gloomily, "Yes, what orders do you have for me, Master?" Just now, he had represented Sword King City in the crowd to present a gift to Master Tam Yuan. However, it seemed like Master Tam Yuan did not remember anything. Perhaps he had never paid attention to him from the beginning. To think that he, the dignified sword leader 7th young Master Fang, would one day be ignored by others. This was not a good feeling. Master Tam Yuan seemed to have seen through Fang Qi Shao's thoughts. He smiled and said, "Please don't blame me, young friend. When I came ashore, this old monk was focused on inheriting my martial arts. Because I don't have much time left, I was a bit anxious and didn't care about other things. Hearing Master Tam Yuan's words, Fang Qi felt a little embarrassed. He waved his hand and said, "I don't blame you, Master." Smiling, Master Tan Yuan took out a jade slip from his bosom and handed it to the seventh young master. "This is a secret manual of the way of the sword that I obtained by accident. It is a manual left behind by a large sect of the way of the sword in the Eastern Sea thousands of years ago. There are only a few scattered sword techniques, but there is no complete sword technique. However, there are even more comprehensions left behind by the experts of the large sect. I believe that this thing will be very useful to you." Seventh young master Fang took the jade slip with a surprised look on his face. This thing was more than useful to him. It was simply a treasure. For Fang Qi, who came from Sword King City, he did not lack sword arts. His karma sword Dao did not need those messy sword arts. However, he could use other people's knowledge to improve himself. Things like sword practice experiences left behind by these ancient powerhouses were the most precious. After reading these things, it would definitely bring another level of understanding to his entire sword Dao. Fang Qi asked hesitantly, "Master, why are you giving me this thing?" Master Tam Yuan smiled freely and said, "I've obtained a lot of good things in the Eastern Sea over the years. I've already given what I can to others. Now that I'm about to pass away, these things can't be brought with me when I'm alive and I can't take them with me when I die. It's useless for me to keep them. Little friend, you came from Sword King City. This thing will definitely be much more valuable to you than to be buried with an old man like me." Compared to other martial artists, who viewed their martial arts inheritance as incomparably important, to the point that even if they died, they would take it with them to the underworld. Master Tan Yuan's view of martial arts was much more open-minded, and he even viewed it as an external object. Fang Qi asked in surprise, "Master, aren't you afraid that I'll do something evil after obtaining this thing and destroy it?" After saying that, Fang Qi glanced at Chu Xiu. He didn't think that Chu Xiu was a good person. Ming Qi's words actually made sense. Master Tam Yuan shook his head and said, "I've said it before. Good and evil can't be judged on the surface. If a person wants to do evil, even if he doesn't have the slightest bit of strength, he can slaughter millions of people with just his mouth. Similarly, some people seem to kill a lot of people, but they can save even more people. Therefore, this old monk might as well bet that little friend won't let this old monk down. This sword arts record will definitely be more cost-effective to give to the descendants of the 5 great sword sects than to be buried with this old monk." There were so many experts in Jianghu, but there weren't many who could be as open-minded as Master Tan Yuan. This was also because Master Tan Yuan really didn't have the time. Otherwise, he would definitely find a suitable person to hand over all the things he had on him. At this moment, Fang Qi also became serious for once. He put the sword back on his back and bowed to Master Tam Yuan. "Thank you, Master." After a pause, Fang Qi added, "I dare not forget your kindness in teaching me. I'll go with you to send you on your last journey, Master." Master Tam Yuan did not stop him. He just nodded and said, "That's good too. The more the merrier. I didn't expect so many people to send me off before I die." Master Tam Yuan's hometown was Songping Prefecture in eastern Qi's Changyang County. It was located in the hinterland of eastern Qi and was more than 10 days away from Donghai County. And now, Master Tam Yuan's body was about to decay. He might not even be able to hold on for more than 20 hours, let alone 10 days. But perhaps Master Tam Yuan's obsession to see his hometown again, Master Tam Yuan managed to hold on for more than 10 days. Finally, he arrived at a dilapidated temple outside Songping Prefecture, Xuanji Temple. Xuanji Temple was just a small temple. Even when Master Tam Yuan was still alive, there were only a dozen monks in Xuanji Temple. But now, all the monks had left, and there was not a single person left. It was either destroyed, or the temple had no successor and had completely withered. But looking at the well-preserved appearance of the temple, it should be the latter. Touching the dusty Buddha statue in Xuanji Temple, Master Tam Yuan let out a long sigh. He traveled to the east in his middle age and returned at the end of his life. He had experienced countless storms. For Master Tam Yuan, he had experienced hardships and confusion in his life, but he had never regretted it. When he first came to the East Sea, he might have only wanted to spread Buddhism and promote the name of Buddhism. But in the end, those superficial meanings disappeared. Everything Master Tam Yuan did had nothing to do with Buddhism. It was just his belief. Sitting on the dirty futon in front of the Buddha statue, Master Tam Yuan closed his eyes. In an instant, the seven-colored light of Buddha shrouded Master Tam Yuan. A majestic power bloomed and drifted between heaven and earth, as if Master Tam Yuan had really become a Buddha. But at this time, Long Tianying's eyes were red. Fang Qi Shao and Chu Xiu were also silent. This was not becoming a Buddha, but returning to the dust. Warriors were born between heaven and earth and refined the qi of heaven and earth into their bodies. Now that they had passed away, this power naturally had to be returned to heaven and earth. In the 69th year of Yonghe in Eastern Qi, holy monk Tan Yuan passed away in Xuanji Temple in Songping Prefecture. He was born here and died here. You're tuning into the Unparalleled SwordWill YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.